Chapter 1. The morning air bit at my skin before I even left the doorway. Dawn had barely touched the valley with its pale light, and already the village smelled of coal dust, damp earth, and the faint tang of smoke from the few chimneys still burning. My fingers throbbed, knuckles raw, as I adjusted the leather strap of the lamp across my shoulder. The weight of it pressed into my collarbone, but it was nothing compared to the weight of the pickaxe in my hands. I descended into the mine shaft, each step on the rough-hewn ladder jarring my already battered muscles. The wooden boards groaned beneath me. Below, the mine's darkness was almost a living thing, swallowing light, echoing my every movement with a chorus of dripping water and distant clatters. My hands, calloused and bleeding from yesterday's work, slid along the damp rock walls for balance. The scent of wet stone was sharp in my nostrils, and my lungs burned with each laborious breath. 3 years, 3 long unbroken years since my parents' death, and still the echo of that day haunted me like a shadow I could not outrun. The fever that took mother, the cough that finally silenced father, leaving me, barely 16 at the time, alone with Albina and Aleksy. I had been all they had ever since. Every day a battle, every coin dug from the earth another line of defense against hunger and misery. Albina would have been 10 then, a tiny girl with eyes too large for her face, already sharp and unyielding as a blade. Aleksy was 5, his curly head full of dreams I could not afford to feed, and yet they thrived, stubborn as weeds, stubborn enough to pull me along when my own strength faltered. I swung the pickaxe again. The sound of it striking rock, echoing through the cavern, was both relief and torment. The work was brutal. Yet it kept my mind from wandering too far into the cold emptiness left by my parents' absence. My back ached, shoulders screamed, and yet I struck again. One more swing, one more. Hours later, I emerged, gasping, hair plastered to my sweat-streaked face. The first rays of sun struck the village, painting the low cottages in shades of gold and rose. My hands were raw, fingers stiff and blackened by coal dust. I trudged home, boots caked with mud, mind already calculating how to stretch the meager coins we had until next week's work. Inside, the small cottage smelled of stale bread and faint smoke. Albina had left me a morsel, a slice of hard bread she had saved despite her own hunger. Aleksy's drawing lay on the table. Crayon scrawls of a house, a mountain, and a stick figure family. I knelt beside him, tracing the lines with a careful fingertip. "You drew the mountain," I said softly, and he nodded, eyes bright and earnest. "And this?" I asked, pointing at a tiny figure at the edge of the paper. "That's me?" "Yes," he whispered, "and you're strong." My chest ached with both pride and sorrow. I picked up Albina, dark-eyed and serious beyond her years, and braided her hair, the familiar rhythm a small comfort. "One day," I promised, "things will get better. I swear it. No more hunger, no more fear." Albina looked at me with her sharp eyes, silently measuring whether I meant it. "I could help," she offered again, as she often did, and I shook my head. "No, my little hawk. Your place is here, not down in the mines. You are too precious to risk." Her eyes narrowed in protest, but I did not relent. Aleksy shifted in his sleep, a small cough escaping his lips, and my stomach tightened. He was too thin, too small for his age, his chest still frail. I pressed my hand against him, willing warmth into his body, willing life itself to hold him fast. Outside, the village stirred. From the neighbor's window, Pani Kowalska, ever sharp-tongued and forever gossiping, called across the road. Her voice was thin, carried on the cold morning wind. "They say servants have gone missing in Rysenberg Castle. Bandits, they say. Or worse, they call it cursed, mark my words." I glanced toward the mountain. There it was, pale and distant through the morning mist, Castle Rysenberg, perched atop Mount Rysy like a crown of stone. The walls gleamed faintly, the spires cutting into the sky. I touched the small wooden cross at my throat, a relic of my mother's faith, and traced the carved edges with my thumb. "Cursed or no, it's only stone," I muttered, more to steady myself than out of belief. Still, my heart tightened. Rumors were one thing. Hunger, poverty, and desperation were another. The climb of the day began again, not to the castle yet, but to survival. I gathered the remaining chores, fetching water, sweeping the floor, checking on the fire. Albina hummed quietly as she arranged the small kitchen. Aleksy slept on, dreaming, unknowing and innocent. My hands bled anew as I knelt to scrub the floor, and my mind wandered, as it often did, to the rumors of bandits, the missing servants, the unknown horrors that might dwell in the mountain's shadows. Yet even as I toiled, the thought of that distant stone fortress perched so high above us filled me with a peculiar pull. Not fear, not curiosity alone, but something deeper, something inescapable. A tug that whispered of opportunity, of escape from endless toil. A promise, perhaps, that life could be more than survival. Albina caught me staring out the window, dark eyes following my gaze. "You'll find a way, Aniela," she said simply. Not a plea, not a demand, just certainty. I squeezed her hand, fighting down the swelling in my chest. "Perhaps," I said, though I did not fully believe it. And yet, as the sun climbed, warming the valley, I felt the first stirrings of resolve. One day, the mines would not own me. One day, I would rise above this valley of stone and dust, and the shadow of the mountain would no longer frighten me. Until then, I worked, I protected, I endured, and I prayed for strength that I was not sure I possessed. The wind shifted outside, carrying the faint scent of pine and the distant tang of frost from the mountaintop. I touched my cross again and whispered a vow, half to God, half to myself. I will care for them, I will survive, and one day, we will be free of this valley. For now, the mine and the village held me fast. But the mountain above waited, silent, imperious, and indifferent to the struggles of a single girl. And I could not help but glance up, wondering, for the first time, what life might be like beyond its shadow. Chapter 2. The village square was bustling more than usual that morning. Women in wool shawls shouted over one another, haggling for eggs or bundles of herbs. Children darted between wooden carts, their bare feet slapping the wet cobblestones. The air smelled of freshly baked bread, warm smoke from the baker's oven, and the metallic tang of iron from Tomasz's forge. I moved among them, my eyes drawn immediately to the notice pinned to the oak post in the center of the square. The paper was crisp, the black letters formal and imposing. Household staff wanted at Castle Rysenberg. Generous wages. Immediate positions. The words seemed to leap off the page. Generous wages. My heart thudded painfully in my chest, and for a brief moment I had to steady myself against the post. 1 month at the castle, 6 months in the mines. The thought made my knees weak with possibility and fear. Tomasz, the blacksmith, noticed me lingering and leaned over his hammering bench. His thick arms bulged with muscle, and his face was streaked with soot. "Well, look who's reading the fine print," he said, wiping sweat from his brow. Sparks leapt from his hammer as it struck iron. "Thinking of climbing that cursed mountain, are you?" I shrugged, careful not to show too much. "I am only reading, Tomasz. I must know what work is offered." "Offered?" He laughed, the sound harsh. "You'll find more than work up there, I promise you. Servants vanish like morning mist, strange sounds, shadows where none should be, doors that slam all by themselves. Even old Widow Crawl won't go near that place." I frowned but did not speak. I had heard the rumors, everyone had, but desperation had a way of drowning out fear. Father Dominic approached then, robes brushing the cobblestones. He paused, eyes narrowing at the notice, lips pressed tight. He made the sign of the cross, murmuring something under his breath. "The mountain is old, child," he said when he reached me. His voice was low, serious. "Older than the village. It has its secrets. Those who go seeking coin alone often find sorrow instead." I looked at him steadily. "I understand your concern, Father, but I have no choice. We cannot survive another winter like the last." He sighed, placing a hand on my shoulder, rough from years of service in the village. "May God protect you, Aniela, and may you have courage enough to face what you do not know." The rest of the marketplace seemed to fade around me. I clutched the edge of the notice, counting in my head how many loaves of bread, how many coins I could save, how many weeks it would take to send something back to Albina and Aleksy. 1 month's wages here equaled 6 months in the mines. It could buy clothing, medicine, even a little warmth for the winter. I swallowed hard, my mouth dry despite the morning chill. By evening, I returned home. The cottage smelled faintly of yesterday's stew and smoke from the hearth. Albina was sweeping the floor with careful, precise strokes, her eyes flicking to mine the moment I stepped inside. Aleksy sat at the table, drawing figures of a family and a mountain, his little hand smudging the paper with charcoal. I have news," I said, voice tight as I set down my bag. Both children looked up at me immediately. Aleksy's eyes were wide and uncertain. Albina's sharp and searching. "The castle, they are seeking staff," I said, choosing my words carefully. "They pay, well, more than I could earn in a year down in the mines." Aleksy's face crumpled. You'd leave us?" His small hands clutched my sleeve. Tears spilled freely down his cheeks. I knelt beside him, pulling him close. "No, my little Aleksy, I am not leaving you. I am going to make sure we survive. I will send for you. I will keep you safe. Do you understand?" He buried his face in my chest, trembling. I held him tightly, feeling the warmth of his small body, wishing I could shield him from everything: hunger, hardship, the cruel world outside our door. Albina's face was a mask of bravery, jaw set, eyes steady. Yet I saw the quick flash of fear, the worry she tried so hard to hide. "We will be safe," she said softly. "We'll be brave. For you, Aniela, we can do this." I grasped their hands, kneeling low to meet their gaze. "Promise me," I said. "No wandering, no fear that you cannot bear together. Promise me you will look after one another." Aleksy nodded, though he sniffled and wiped his cheeks on Albina's sleeve. Albina's eyes softened, a small glimmer of trust shining through the fear. At that moment, Pani Jasinska arrived at the doorway, hands full of loaves of bread. "For your journey," she said, pressing a warm, fragrant loaf into my hands. Her voice shook slightly. "I will check on them while you are gone. Every week, I promise." I hugged her tightly. "Thank you. Truly, you don't know how much this means to me." Outside, the last golden rays of sunlight kissed the village rooftops. I hoisted my small bag over my shoulder and took a deep breath. One last glance at our cottage, tiny, humble, filled with laughter, tears, and love. There they were, Albina standing tall despite the worry in her eyes, Aleksy nestled against her chest, clinging. I waved, committing the image to memory, the curl of Aleksy's hair, Albina's determined stance, the smoke curling from our chimney. "I will return," I whispered. "I will make it better, I promise." Turning toward the looming shadow of Mount Rysy, I felt a shiver run down my spine. Castle Rysenberg rose like a sentinel in the fading mist, spires reaching toward the clouds, walls gray and silent. My heart raced, not only with fear but with anticipation. With one last glance behind, I stepped forward, the weight of responsibility heavy on my shoulders, the thrill of possibility in my chest, and the pull of the unknown drawing me onward. Chapter 3: The Castle Gates. The path up Mount Rysy was narrower than I expected, winding and treacherous, the stones slick from early morning mist. My boots slipped once, twice, and I cursed under my breath, gripping the strap of the small bag I carried as if my life depended on it, which, in a way, it did. Each step brought the castle closer, and with it a mixture of awe, fear, and anticipation I could not quite name. The mountain itself seemed alive, the jagged rock face bearing the scars of centuries. Villagers called them Rysy's scratches, deep, jagged fissures that ran like veins across the gray stone. I ran my fingers along the surface at one point, shivering. The rock was cold and sharp under my palm, as if it had been carved not by nature, but by some ancient hand with purpose. Looking up, Castle Rysenberg rose like a dark crown, its spires clawing at the clouds, gray stone walls mottled with moss and age, gargoyles perched on corners, eyes seeming to follow my every step. I paused to catch my breath and took in the sight fully. The mist hugged the towers, lending them an otherworldly aura. I felt my heart hammering, equal parts thrill and fear. Could such a place exist? Could I work here, amidst the whispered legends, the tales of missing servants, the shadowed halls? A sharp voice snapped me from my thoughts. "Step aside, girl." I turned to see a tall woman with iron-gray hair pinned severely atop her head, her thin frame draped in black. Her eyes were dark and piercing, and her gaze swept over me like a blade. "Name?" she demanded. "Aniela Kowalska, ma'am," I replied, voice firm though my palms were slick with sweat. "From the valley below?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. "I know of your family." "Careful, girl, the mountain does not forgive recklessness. You will find the castle the same. Now, move forward." She was Greta, the stern housekeeper I had heard whispers of on the path up. No nonsense, no leniency. She tested everyone. Already I felt her measuring me, weighing whether I belonged or would falter. The courtyard was vast and cold, paved with uneven stones slick with dew. Horses whinnied in the stables, their breath steaming in the crisp morning air. Servants scurried like ants, carrying bundles, baskets, and brooms. Their faces were wary, anxious, each step measured. I spotted 2 other applicants waiting near the fountain, their faces pale and uneasy. Zofia was timid, her hands trembling as she held her apron. She gave a small, nervous bow to Greta. I will do my best, ma'am," she whispered, her voice barely carried. Kasia, by contrast, was composed, her shoulders square, eyes sharp. She met Greta's glare without flinching, head high, breathing steady. I noticed Greta's faint nod of approval. "First," Greta barked, "you will demonstrate your cleaning skills. Do not damage anything. Do not speak unless spoken to. Discretion is required." She turned, gesturing to a hallway lined with tapestries. "Begin." I knelt immediately, taking the mop and bucket she handed me. Water swirled brown as I scrubbed, feeling the weight of responsibility in every careful stroke. Each tapestry seemed ancient, the colors muted but still vibrant, the silk threads fragile. A careless tug, a misplaced foot, and I could ruin centuries of work. Kasia worked beside me, methodical and confident, while Zofia struggled, water splashing, hands fumbling. I glanced at her and offered a small, encouraging smile, but she avoided my gaze, paralyzed with fear. The real test came moments later. Greta clapped her hands sharply. Emergency! From the dining hall came a loud crash. A tray of glasses tipped, wine spilling across the polished floor, sliding toward a tapestry. My stomach lurched. Without thinking, I stepped forward, sliding my mop in a swift arc, guiding the red liquid away from the silk. My heart pounded as the last drop was diverted, leaving the tapestry untouched. Greta's eyes narrowed. She said nothing, only observed, the faintest flicker of approval passing over her face before she returned to her usual steely gaze. "You have quick thinking," she finally remarked. "Do not let it be wasted. You will begin in the scullery. Lowest rank, but observe carefully. Learn." My chest tightened with a mix of pride and humility. Lowest rank, but I would prove myself. Every lesson, every glance, every whispered instruction would be absorbed like a sponge. The scullery was cramped and dimly lit, a stark contrast to the shining halls above. Steam rose from the large pots, and the smell of boiling water, soap, and lingering food mixed into a pungent fog. I sank onto the wooden bench, taking a deep breath. Here, in this simple, utilitarian space, I would learn the rules of a world far beyond the valley, far above the mines. Marta, a warm-faced woman in her 30s, approached, carrying a basket of linens. "First day?" she asked softly, her voice gentle, motherly. "Yes," I replied, trying not to sound too eager. "It is overwhelming." She chuckled lightly, smoothing the edge of a cloth. "It is always overwhelming at first. Just remember, keep your head down, do your work well, and listen more than you speak. You'll do fine." Jan, a lanky young man with freckles and reddish hair, leaned against the doorway, giving me a conspiratorial grin. "Watch your back," he whispered. "Greta sees everything, but the walls have ears too, and the Lord—" He shuddered slightly. "They say he never ages. My grandmother worked here 50 years ago. Swears he looks the same now as he did then." Marta rolled her eyes. "Old castle, old stories. Pay them no mind, Aniela. Fear and gossip do little to help your hands or heart." I nodded, though the seed of unease had been planted. The castle's opulence was overwhelming. The halls beyond the scullery glinted with polished wood, tapestries depicting battles long past, chandeliers dripping with crystals that caught candlelight even in the daylight. I glimpsed a hall lined with silver plates, intricate candelabras, furniture carved with painstaking artistry, while in our scullery we scrubbed, washed, and mopped, sharing a small bench and stale bread. The contrast made my blood burn. Anger, sharp and bitter, rose in me. How could so much wealth exist while my siblings froze in the valley, scraping to survive? I closed my fists, then caught myself, guilt striking like a hammer. I had come for them, for survival, for a way to help. But the thought of being angry at this injustice while my family suffered made me feel small, selfish. The courtyard gates were closed for the evening, a heavy clang echoing against the stone walls. Greta's voice cut through the fading light. "Never enter the east wing. Never ask questions. Never disturb the Lord. Never go out after the bells toll dark." I shivered, imagining the shadowed halls beyond, imagining what secrets might lurk behind the locked doors. The tales, the superstitions, they were whispered warnings and glimpses of truth. Later, in the scullery, I washed a pan with trembling hands, the day's experiences replaying in my mind. Greta's gaze, Zofia's failures, Kasia's composure, Marta's warmth, Jan's whispered stories, all mixed into a tangle of fear and fascination. The castle was more than a building. It was a living, breathing entity, observing, testing, always waiting. Yet even in the dimness, I felt a spark. I could survive here. I would survive. I would prove my worth, not for the Lord, not for Greta, but for Albina, for Aleksy, for the family I had promised to protect. That night, as the bells tolled across the stone courtyard, I lay on the narrow pallet provided for the scullery maid, listening to the sounds of the castle. Doors creaking, the distant clatter of armored boots, whispers carried down shadowed corridors. The wind howled outside, rattling the shutters. A part of me trembled, but another part, smaller, stubborn, thrived on the thrill. Castle Rysenberg was imposing, merciless, and alive. I was a mere human in its midst, but I would find my place. One careful step at a time. I touched the cross my mother had given me, tracing its carved edges with a thumb, whispering the promise that had carried me up the mountain. I will protect them, I murmured. I will survive. I will not fail. And somewhere beyond the locked east wing, I sensed the shadow of something, or someone, watching, waiting, patient and eternal. Chapter 4. Shadows and Whispers. The days at Castle Rysenberg settled into a rhythm that was exhausting but bearable, at least compared to the mines I had left behind. Dawn brought with it the harsh clang of the servant's bell, a summons to the scullery, the kitchens, and the endless tasks that seemed to multiply with every hour. I scrubbed stone floors until my hands stung, polished silver until my arms ached, and carried baskets of linen so large that I feared I might drop them on the very expensive carpets I was forbidden to touch. Yet even in this relentless labor, there was a quiet satisfaction. I was no longer scraping coins from the earth with bleeding hands, no longer inhaling the dust that clawed at my lungs. Here, I earned my bread and sent it home to Albina and Aleksy. It was honest work, and though the wages were barely enough to make the palace of riches in the upper halls seem just and fair, I counted each coin with a sense of purpose. Marta, the kind-hearted kitchen stewardess, became my anchor in this strange world. She moved with maternal grace, always aware of who needed guidance and who needed a gentle reprimand. "You've done well today, Aniela," she said one afternoon, wiping her hands on her apron as we arranged bowls of soup for the higher-ranked servants. "Keep your head down and your hands busy, and you'll last longer than most." "I'll do my best," I said, though my voice was tired. Marta's approval meant more than Greta's harsh nods. Greta demanded perfection without the smallest show of warmth, while Marta offered comfort without judgment. "You remind me of someone," Marta added softly, glancing at me with a thoughtful smile. "I had a girl once, many years ago, brave and sharp like you, but she left before she understood what she was capable of." I felt a twinge in my chest, but did not ask further. Secrets hung thick in this castle, and curiosity was best kept in check. In the kitchen, I also met young Iwa. A timid orphan like myself had been 3 years ago. She watched me with wide, dark eyes as I chopped vegetables or stirred pots. I took her under my wing, showing her the correct way to scrub pans without scratching the copper, teaching her how to balance the flour for bread. "Like this," I said gently, demonstrating with a wooden spoon. Iwa copied, careful not to spill a single bit. She reminded me of Aleksy, small, innocent, and eager to learn. Protecting her felt instinctual, like a tether to the life I had left behind in the valley. Despite the comforting presence of Marta and Iwa, unease gnawed at me. The castle was alive with silence, and shadows moved with purpose. I never saw the Lord or his close attendants during the day. Certain wings were forbidden, doors locked, hallways empty. Some servants looked pale, almost drawn, and yet they insisted it was simply the strain of labor. "Old stone walls," Marta would say with a shrug. "Hard work and little sun, nothing more." I tried to accept her words, to convince myself that the stories and unease were products of imagination. But there were moments, fleeting, almost imperceptible, that made my pulse quicken. A corridor empty of light except for a single candle flickering on the far wall. A door closed firmly, but I could swear I heard the soft echo of footsteps inside. One afternoon, Greta summoned me. Her eyes were as sharp as ever, but today there was a faint glimmer of something almost approving. "First wages," she said, handing me a small envelope of coins. "Do not squander them. They are the reward for diligence, not for curiosity." I bowed. "Thank you, ma'am. I will send most home immediately." Using Jersey, the cart driver who made weekly trips to the village, I ensured that Albina received almost everything I earned. That evening, Father Dominic arrived at our cottage with a letter from Albina. He cleared his throat and read aloud in his gentle voice, "Dearest Aniela, Aleksy's cough has eased. We bought the medicine you suggested. He misses you terribly, and so do I. The garden looks empty without your hands, and we talk of you every day. Please be careful. We pray for you." I swallowed hard, my pulse racing. The stories were true. There was someone extraordinary in that wing. The Lord, perhaps, though the notion terrified and thrilled me in equal measure. My hands shook slightly as I set the tray down. Marta and Jan passed, oblivious, chatting quietly, unaware of the figure who had vanished like mist. I could not speak of it. I dared not. Curiosity in the castle was dangerous, but the image lingered, etched in my mind, the impossibly beautiful man watching over the valley as though carrying the weight of eternity itself. That night, I lay on the narrow pallet in the scullery, staring at the ceiling, the image repeating in my mind with every shadow cast by the flickering candlelight. The castle breathed around me, alive and patient, waiting. I traced the cross my mother had given me, whispering a promise I was beginning to understand. "I will survive. I will learn. I will protect them," I murmured, my fingers pressing into the carved wood. The castle was vast, cold, and merciless, but I was not alone. Marta's warmth, Iwa's small smile, the memory of Albina and Aleksy, they were my anchor. And yet, beyond the locked doors, beyond the forbidden east wing, something waited. And I knew in the hollow of my chest that my life would never be the same. Chapter 5. The Raid. The night air lay heavy over Castle Rysenberg, thick with mist that clung to the stone walls and wind-whipped banners. The servants had already gone to bed, or at least those who could sleep had attempted it. I was in the scullery, scrubbing the last traces of dinner from pots, my arms aching, my hands smeared with soap and water, when the first sound reached my ears. A sharp metallic clang, followed by a chorus of shouts. At first, I thought it was a dream or some late-night accident, but then came the roar of breaking wood, the crack of splintering stone. My heart thumped violently against my ribs. Bandits! Marta's scream echoed from the hallway above, piercing through the scullery ceiling like a warning bell. I bolted upright, adrenaline surging, arms instinctively tensing. The castle had always felt alive, but now it pulsed with chaos, as if it itself had been wounded. Smoke and dust wafted through the corridors, the smell of burning wood stinging my eyes and throat. I coughed, clawing at my damp apron to cover my mouth. Through the haze, I saw figures moving with terrifying purpose. Shadows flitted across the walls, men shouting in guttural voices, their blades catching the dim light of torches. One, taller than the rest, moved at the head of the group, his scarred face twisted in fury. "Cleanse this place," he bellowed, voice like a whip cracking through the night. Captain Volker, though I did not know his name then, was a figure of terror, leading the attack with brutal efficiency. He struck without hesitation, driving servants into panic and confusion. "Everyone out!" Marta shouted, grabbing Iwa's trembling hand. "Quickly! To the courtyard!" I spun, trying to assess the chaos. The servants were running in every direction, tripping over each other, their screams mixing with the shouts of the attackers. Sparks flew as torches struck the walls, igniting curtains, and the heat of fire pressed against my skin. Then I heard the faintest, most heart-wrenching sound, a groan beneath the falling rubble. Old Basia. I knew the hallways near the library where she often lingered to pray. I dashed through the smoke, dodging falling beams and overturned furniture, until I reached the collapsing corridor. She was trapped beneath a timber beam, her frail body pinned, eyes wide with fear, white hair matted with soot. "Aniela," she whispered, voice trembling. "I can't." "Shh, I've got you," I said, heart pounding, straining against the heavy wood. Sweat stung my eyes as I gritted my teeth and pushed with every ounce of strength. "Hold on, Basia. I won't let them." The beam shifted with a loud crack, threatening to crush me too, but I leveraged my weight and freed her. She fell into my arms, coughing violently from smoke, and I half-carried, half-dragged her to the nearest hallway that seemed less damaged. "Go!" I yelled to Marta and Iwa, who were pinned by debris. Marta had been shielding the child, but now the stones above threatened to collapse. I threw myself into the rubble, rolling stones aside, my hands scraping against rough wood and stone. Marta pulled herself free, and I helped Iwa stumble to safety. Both were bruised, but alive. A brief, surreal moment followed as my gaze swept across the chaos. 3 figures moved in ways that defied reason, shadows slipping between flames and smoke with impossible speed. My mind screamed that it was my imagination. The chaos, the fear, the adrenaline, but the movements were too precise, too coordinated, and then I saw him. One figure paused, tall and impossibly elegant. Dark hair fell across his face, and the pale light of the burning torches illuminated features I would not soon forget. High cheekbones, piercing eyes that seemed to bore into my very soul, a jaw carved with centuries of endurance, a presence that made the world narrow until it was nothing but him. Our eyes met across the smoke and carnage, and for a heartbeat, time stopped. It was as if the fire, the falling beams, the screaming servants, all the chaos were reduced to a distant echo. Recognition? Curiosity? I could not name the sensation that roared through me, but it was raw, immediate, and terrifying. And then he was gone. A flicker of movement, a shadow slipping past my vision, and he disappeared into the haze. My heart raced violently, and I shook my head, willing myself to breathe. I must have imagined it. A trick of adrenaline. Fear. Smoke. Anything but reality. Aniela, move. Marta's voice cut through the haze, snapping me back to the night. I grabbed her hand, guiding her and Iwa toward the courtyard. The castle groaned and cracked as flames licked at its walls, splintering timbers raining down with lethal precision. I barely noticed the screams of the other servants, the panicked shouts, the collapse of familiar corridors. I tripped over a fallen beam and landed hard, scraping my cheek against the stone floor. Pain flared, but I forced myself up, driven by a need I could not explain, to save, to survive, to protect. When we reached the courtyard, the horror was complete. Several servants lay motionless, some trapped beneath debris, others fleeing in terror. Zofia, timid, weak, fragile, was gone. My stomach churned with grief and guilt. Greta appeared suddenly, moving through the courtyard with her usual precision, assessing damage, rescuing where needed. Her eyes landed on me, streaked with soot and blood, and she simply nodded once. "You stayed," she said. Not a question, not a command. Respect lingered in that single statement, and I felt a strange warmth pierce the fear. "You saved us," Marta said breathlessly, tears streaking her soot-covered face. "You're so brave." I shook my head, unable to meet her eyes. I just... No, she insisted, gripping my arm. "You did this. You saved lives. Don't minimize it." Jan came running up, face pale, eyes wide. "Those weren't ordinary bandits," thus he panted. "Something's wrong here. This was different. Faster, smarter, too organized, too precise." I nodded silently, but I did not mention the figure I had seen, the impossibly fast, devastatingly beautiful man who had paused to look at me, if only for a moment. Who could believe such a thing in the chaos of a night like this? Even I questioned my own eyes. Later, when the flames had been contained by the castle's own guards and the wounded had been gathered into the infirmary, I found myself leaning against a wall, trembling, breathing ragged. The scent of smoke and iron was thick in the air. Debris littered the courtyards and halls, and the silence between the sporadic cries of the injured felt unnatural. I closed my eyes, and there it was again, the figure in the east wing, his eyes meeting mine. The world narrowed, as if no one else existed in that instant. And then the spell of chaos returned, and he vanished again, leaving only the pounding of my heart and the smoke that clouded my senses. I told myself it was impossible. Speed, grace, that presence, things no man could possess. And yet, in the pit of my stomach, I knew it had been real. My instincts, honed by years of survival in the mines, told me this man, whoever he was beyond anything I had ever encountered. Exhausted, covered in soot, blood, and sweat, I sank to the ground as Greta approached again. Her hands rested on my shoulders. "You did what needed to be done," she said quietly. "Others faltered. You stayed. That is all that matters." Marta knelt beside me, brushing hair from my face. "We are alive because of you, Aniela. We have each other still, thanks to you. Never forget that." I shook my head, mind still racing, heart still pounding. The castle was no longer merely a place of work. It was alive, dangerous, and magnificent in its menace, and somewhere beyond the east wing I had glimpsed its heart. The night would not soon be forgotten, and I, Aniela Kowalska, would not forget him.
Chapter 6. The Lord's Request. I stand in my study, hands folded behind my back, watching the flicker of candlelight across the walls lined with ancient tomes. Lucian and Dante pace, their voices echoing in the high-ceilinged room. They grow bolder, Dante says, boots clanging on the floor. Better armed, more coordinated. They will not stop until everything is ours. Celestina sits with her hands folded on her lap, ice in her posture, yet her voice cuts through the tension. They are human. They make mistakes. That is why the servants must remain ignorant. Knowledge is vulnerability, ignorance protection. The less they understand, the safer they are. I listen, but my mind is elsewhere. Lucian's voice finally pulls me back. The small girl, the one who stayed behind. Dark hair. What is her name? Aniela Kowalska, Celestina says softly. She is new, only a scullery maid. 3 weeks, yet brave, yes, though inexperienced. I let the name roll over me. Aniela. Angel, in Old Polish. Brave, yes, but more than that. I remember the way she moved through smoke and fire, dragging the old woman to safety while others fled. There was precision in her fear, control in her panic. She is not ordinary, I murmur, almost to myself. Lucian narrows his green eyes at me. Curious? No, I say, but my voice feels hollow. You watch her, he presses. I watch all my servants, I answer sharp. You do not know the others' names, he points out. I do not respond. Instead, I let the thought linger. I have not been stirred like this in centuries. Something about her refuses to let me look away. She does not cower, does not fawn, does not beg. She chooses. When Celestina approaches, I feel a tug of impatience I cannot quite explain. See to it yourself, I tell her. Her eyes search mine, and I see the question there. Why this one, Vitomir? She is young, untested, human. I simply say, she is different. Trust your judgment.
The summons comes early, delivered with Greta's usual sharp efficiency. You are to be transferred. A different position, higher rank. Panic and curiosity clash in my chest. Had I made a mistake? Had I been caught doing something wrong? Greta's stern eyes give nothing away. Follow me, she orders, moving through hallways I had never noticed. Narrow corridors open to hidden stairwells, smelling of dust and old stone. Candlelight flickers against walls, shadows dancing like specters. My heart hammers. I try to steady my breath. Finally, we stop before double doors carved with intricate patterns. Greta knocks sharply, then pushes them open. I step inside and freeze. 2 figures await me, one tall and imposing, eyes cold and sharp. Lucian, I would learn his name later. The other, the woman standing before me, stops my heart entirely. She is the most beautiful woman I have ever seen. Dark blonde hair pinned in a style that seems effortless but precise. Ice blue eyes that seem to look through me. High cheekbones, lips curved in a faint, unreadable smile. Yet there is something more than beauty. A strength, a power that radiates from her every movement. I feel tiny in her presence, aware of my own fragility. She is poised, elegant, but I know with certainty that she could crush anyone who opposed her. You are Aniela Kowalska, she says, her voice soft but firm. I am Celestina Zawadzka. I will oversee your introduction. What you are about to accept is unlike anything you have known. My throat tightens. Her eyes seem to measure me, searching for courage, for honesty, for strength. I swallow hard. Lucian steps forward. You showed courage during the attack last night. I did what anyone would, I say, cheeks burning. Most did not, Celestina adds. You remained when others fled. That is why you have been noticed. The weight of their gaze presses on me. This is no ordinary promotion. You are being offered a special position, Lucian says. It requires personal service to the Lord, 15 times your current wages. My mind reels. 15 times I could buy medicine for Aleksy, food, warm clothing, perhaps even schooling. I could protect my siblings in a way I never could in the mines. What kind of service? I ask, voice trembling. You will know if you accept, Lucian says. It is unusual, but you will be protected, well treated. Will I be harmed? I whisper. Celestina's gaze softens slightly. No, never. I think of Aleksy's cough, Albina's thin wrists, our leaking cottage roof. My heart pounds. I could do this. I must. I accept, I say, voice steadying. The doors close behind me with a soft click. Alone in the hidden room, candlelight flickers across tapestries depicting distant mountains and ancient battles. The weight of my choice settles around me like a stone. I have crossed a threshold into a world I do not yet understand.
I watch from above, unseen, as she steps fully into the hidden chamber. The way she accepts her fate without hesitation, yet with careful thought, stirs something long dormant. Most humans panic, flee, or grovel, not her. She chooses, deliberately, and I feel admiration. A small, unfamiliar ache. Something inside me whispers that I have made a decision I do not fully understand. I have not been moved in centuries. Yet here, in this flickering light, a human girl has captured my attention.
I wander the room, touching the carved wood and the cold polish of the stone floor beneath my hands. Candlelight flickers across my face. My heart races, not from fear alone, but from the gravity of my decision. Celestina's gaze follows me, assessing, unblinking. I realize I am being measured for courage, for honesty, for strength. She is both beautiful and lethal, and I cannot decide if there is warmth in her eyes or simply curiosity. Either way, it does not matter. Chapter 7. The Unveiling. The stone steps beneath my boots were chill beneath the morning mist, and the echo of each footfall seemed to carry secrets I could not yet fathom. Celestina led the way, moving with a grace that was more feline than human. She did not look back, and the silence she imposed pressed upon me with a weight I could scarce endure. "Shall I follow?" I ventured at last, my voice trembling. "Follow," she replied, her tone even yet compelling, allowing for no argument. The narrow stairway twisted downward, shadows deepening with each step. Tapestries, worn with age, adorned the walls, their scenes of hunts and distant castles flickering with torchlight. My pulse quickened. The grandeur of this hidden wing both awed and unnerved me. At the bottom, Celestina halted before a pair of tall double doors. She turned to me at last, those piercing ice-blue eyes meeting my own. "Aniela Kowalska," she said, voice calm yet commanding. "What I am about to show you will rend asunder all you have ever believed. You must steel yourself, for there will be no unseeing." I swallowed hard. I do not understand." "You shall, in due course," she said, and for a moment the hardness in her gaze softened. "But know this, once you see, there is no returning to ignorance. Prepare yourself for truth." My stomach quivered, yet I stepped forward. Celestina's gaze followed me, unblinking. "Mark me well, Aniela. Watch closely, and with full measure of attention. You must open your eyes and mind alike, for all you know of the world is but a shadow of reality." She drew in a breath, voice lowering to a whisper that seemed to reverberate in the stone chamber. "We are not as mortal men understand us. We are older, stronger, and different. I am, what your superstitions name, a vampire." I blinked, certain I had misheard. You speak in jest. It cannot be." She shook her head, pale locks of hair glinting in the torchlight. "No jest. You must see for yourself." In a motion swifter than thought, her fangs extended, gleaming, terrible and exquisite. With a single hand, she lifted a stone bench as if it were a child's toy. My knees trembled, and I covered my mouth. "This is no fabrication," she said softly. "All you glimpsed during the raid, the speed, the strength, the terror, it was but a fraction of what we are." I stumbled back, heart hammering. "Impossible. It cannot be true." Celestina's gaze softened fractionally, though the aura of command remained. "I am not cruel, Aniela. None of us are. Yet you must understand fully the path that is offered to you. We live hidden, feeding where consent is given, protecting the fragile lives of mortals. And now you are to be offered a place among us." The chamber seemed to shrink, the flickering torchlight dancing upon walls gilded with paintings and tapestries. My hands flew to my cheeks, the weight of disbelief pressing hard upon me. From the shadows, an older man stepped forth. His hair, streaked with gray, framed a kindly face, his eyes gentle yet firm. "Aniela," he said, "you are safe. None here shall harm you. But you must understand, the choice is yours. You may leave untouched, return to your duties as before, or accept a position that will change the course of your life." I laughed, a short, incredulous sound. "Safe? You? Safe? You lift stones, you have fangs, you are creatures of nightmare." He inclined his head mildly. "By mortal reckoning, perhaps, but those who serve of their own volition do so with honor, with protection, and with the Lord's regard. None suffer." He waved to a man lounging upon a chaise, elegantly dressed, hands expressive even when still. "This is Stefan. He has served Lord Luckchen for 2 years. Look upon him. He is hale, content, unbroken." I stared, disbelief etched across my features. Stefan waved cheerfully, as if performing for my benefit. "Alive, well, and quite stylish, I dare say." "I do not understand. Why would anyone consent to such?" My voice faltered. "Because there is dignity, protection, and purpose," the older man replied gravely. "And in rare circumstances, the Lord himself requests a human feeder." Such favor has not been granted in 50 years. I pressed my hands to my throat, thoughts racing to Albina and Aleksy, to the medicine I could purchase, the warmth I could afford. My pulse thundered, my head dizzy with the enormity of the revelation. And I am to serve him? I whispered, voice trembling. Celestina's gaze softened just enough to unsettle me anew. Yes, yet you may refuse. If you do, the Lord shall erase all memory of this encounter. You shall return to your previous duties, believing only that you declined a promotion. I shook my head, staring at the floor, heart and mind in turmoil. The raid, the fire, the smoke, the terrifying speed had been no illusion. The Lord I had glimpsed across the chaos was a vampire. Shall I become like you? I asked, scarcely daring the words. No, Celestina replied. The act of feeding alone does not transform. Only turning, which requires death in concert with vampire blood, alters a mortal soul. And pain, I ventured, voice quivering. At first, she said softly, then none. I thought of the other servants, Marta, Jan, Iwa. They must never know. Lies would be required, yet I felt no hesitation in my choice. I thought of Aleksy's cough, Albina's frailty, the threadbare walls of our cottage. My hands still trembled, yet my voice found resolve. I accept, for my brother and sister. The older man inclined his head, approving. A true heart of family speaks in such terms. Stefan guided me to a polished table where a small crystal chalice awaited, filled with a copper-colored liquid. Celestina and the elder stood at either side. Drink, the elder instructed. This shall bind you to the Lord. You shall sense him, his presence, his direction, faint though it may be. He shall sense you. This bond preserves the secrets of this house and the safety of all within. My hand shook as I raised the chalice. The liquid was thick, warm, metallic, copper and something ancient. I drank. It flowed through me, a current of something older than time, binding me irrevocably to a power I scarcely understood. Instantly, my vision sharpened, my senses heightened. And then I felt it. A presence somewhere above, watching, distant yet unmistakable. The Lord. I could sense him, his power faintly, like a shadow brushing against mine. Stefan patted my shoulder. Welcome, Aniela. Few mortals ever enter this world, and even fewer remain unbroken. I nodded, trembling, heart hammering. My world had shifted. I was bound not merely to a role, but to a being whose shadow stretched across the castle like living night. Celestina's gaze softened, the hint of admiration for my resolve in her eyes. Lessons shall follow. You will learn to feed, to move amongst vampires while appearing as mortal to others. You will still see your fellow servants, but always remember, normalcy is a mask you must wear. I whispered, yes, Pani. The candlelight flickered across the chamber, and I understood at last the life I had known was gone. I had stepped into a world both terrifying and sublime, and there was no turning back. Chapter 8. First Blood. 4 weeks had passed since the oath, and I had endured them as if they were mere days. Each dawn I rose, scrubbing, polishing, running laps through corridors, lifting weights far heavier than I had ever imagined, all under Celestina's relentless gaze. And yet she had been gentler than I expected, softening my hands with oils, dressing me in silks that made my heart ache for Albina and Aleksy, who would never know such luxury. Today was the day I would feed Lord Vitomir. My body trembled with anticipation, fear, and the strange thrill that had begun to grow with each lesson. I paused briefly before leaving my chambers, glancing at the small, simple painting I had brought from our cottage. Albina's face smiled up at me, and Aleksy's tiny hand seemed to reach for mine. My throat tightened. I whispered under my breath, "For you. I can do this for you." Celestina met me at the staircase, her expression unreadable. "Walk with composure, Aniela. Nothing you do today must betray fear beyond the necessary respect." I nodded, adjusting the silk of my shift. My pulse raced not from exertion, but from the knowledge that I was about to cross a boundary I could never return from. The corridors of the upper castle were unfamiliar, laden with centuries of history in their gilded frames, dark tapestries, and flickering sconces. Every painting seemed to watch me. Every shadow followed my steps. Through the bond I felt him. A presence cold and commanding, yet impossibly near. My breath hitched. The massive doors to his chambers loomed ahead, and Celestina paused. "Beyond this you will meet the Lord. Step with confidence, but tremble if you must. Only do not falter completely. That would be unwise." I swallowed. My hands clenched at my sides. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was vast, immense, yet intimate in its darkness. Candles flickered on every surface, their glow dancing across the spines of ancient books, the rich fabrics of curtains, and the polished wood of the hearth. He sat in a high-backed chair, reading, utterly indifferent to my presence. My heart thundered in my chest. The shadow of the man I had glimpsed during the raid, impossibly tall and cold, sat before me. Dark hair, pale skin, sharp features that could slice through the night itself. I could not breathe, yet I could not turn away. Finally, he looked up, his eyes dark, endless, like winter storms, finding mine. My knees went weak. He rose slightly, the flames behind him casting shifting shadows across his face. "You're the brave little girl from the raid," he said, voice even, detached, as if pronouncing a fact, rather than speaking to a human being. I straightened my back, indignation flaring despite my fear. "I have a name, Aniela," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. He raised one sculpted eyebrow, a faint smirk flickering. "Most feeders do not speak unless spoken to." "Most lords, perhaps," I replied, "say more interesting things." My hands clenched involuntarily, knuckles white. The silence that followed was dangerous, charged. I could feel it pressing in, yet I did not step back. "Come here," he commanded, and I obeyed, heart hammering so violently I feared it would betray me.
I had expected trembling, abject fear, compliance. I had not expected her, this human, to approach with chin lifted, eyes sharp, spine unyielding. The scent of her fear mingled with something else, something raw and vivid, pulling me in despite my better judgment. Her pulse raced as I had imagined, yet there was fire in her, defiance. Perhaps she was foolish, or perhaps brave. I allowed her close, observing the way her shoulders tensed, the small quiver of her hands. Normally, I would have fed from a vampire attendant, efficient, predictable, unchallenging. This was different. She asked questions, questions I had never needed to answer. Does it hurt? How often? Will I become pale like the night servants? How long does it take? Will I remember? I found myself answering, though I could not name why. My hands rested lightly at her elbows, guiding her to stand before me. The first time may startle you, yet it will not break you. You will feed in stages, slowly. The rest, you shall remember. Her eyes searched mine, full of fear and determination. I inhaled her scent, the sharp tang of iron and copper, warmth and earth, vibrant with life. I had not tasted mortal blood in decades, had long since believed its pleasures dulled by time. Yet this was different. I reached for her. She stiffened immediately, shoulders rigid, hands clutching my jacket. I tilted her head, exposing the delicate curve of her neck, the small pulse beneath her skin. "Do not resist," I murmured. "It is worse if you do." She gasped, small, sharp, the sound reverberating through me in ways I had not anticipated. My fangs grazed her skin, drawing the first touch of her blood. The warmth, the taste, sunlight and soil, alive and intoxicating, flowed over me, over my senses, igniting something I had long thought extinguished. She stiffened further, gripping me instinctively, and yet her fear was interwoven with indignation. "You could have warned me it would feel like that," she cried. I drew back slightly, licking the wound closed with care, amused despite myself. "Like what?" She could not articulate the sensation, flushing furiously. Like. Her gaze fell, shy yet defiant, and I found myself smiling faintly, captivated despite decades of practiced detachment. "You may go," I said at last. "Return Friday." She straightened, hand instinctively brushing at her neck, dignity restored enough to mask her inner tumult. And yet as she left, the echo of her presence lingered in my senses, a memory and a pull, both unbearable and exquisite.
The sensation lingered in my veins long after I had fled the chamber. Warmth spread through me, intoxicating, strange, almost violating in its intimacy. I clutched at his sleeve in instinctive shock, feeling that connection, more than mere blood, more than mere ritual. I gasped his name, not in fear, but in disbelief at the depth of sensation and closeness I had not anticipated. My head spun, legs weak, pulse echoing in my ears. I stepped back, forcing myself to walk, to leave, but the bond thrummed between us, a tether I could neither sever nor fully understand.
I remained seated, disturbed, the taste of her on my tongue, her warmth in my senses. That defiance, that fire, and that very human blood, intoxicating in ways I had lied myself. I had expected compliance, fear, tears. Instead, I had found indignation, fire, and something unnameable. Lucian appeared silently beside me. "Well, she's adequate," I replied, though I could not keep the faint trace of awe from my voice. Lucian smirked knowingly. You're lying. I can smell it on you. You are affected. I said nothing, allowing the bond to settle, allowing the shock to find its place in the cold chambers of my mind. I had not expected a human to stir me so, to remind me that life, mortal, vibrant, and fleeting, could still have power over the immortal.
Chapter 9. Adjustments. I awoke each morning to a quiet stillness that was wholly unfamiliar, the sort that belonged to a world apart from the soot-stained, mind-stiffened mornings of my past. Sunlight sifted through the thick curtains of my feeder-wing chamber, glancing off the polished wood of the dresser and the sheen of the silk sheets that softened every corner. My fingers traced the fabric, soft and unfamiliar, and a small, guilty smile tugged at my lips. I had never imagined such comfort, never dared to, and yet it felt almost unnatural, like stepping into someone else's life. Marta arrived with her usual brisk steps, a faint clack of her boots against the stone floor, announcing her presence. She studied me carefully. "So, what do you do in this new position, Aniela?" she asked, her voice carrying that mixture of curiosity and maternal warmth she had always possessed. "Surely you must keep busy." I paused, forcing my voice to remain even. "I attend to the Lord's household needs," I said cautiously. "It is rather tedious, I confess. Polishing silver, ensuring all is as it should be, a great deal of waiting about, in truth." Marta's eyes lingered on me longer than necessary, those sharp, perceptive eyes noting more than I intended. "Humph, that does not sound like the sort of life that would make you look as you do now," she said softly, almost under her breath. I touched my fuller cheeks, still tingling from the contrast of my new body to the hollow one I had known. The reflection in the tall mirror startled me. No longer the gaunt girl whose hands had cracked and bled from the mines, I now saw a young woman with curves filling out her frame, skin luminous, hair glossy and dark as a raven's wing. Even my hands, once raw and scarred, rested gently, soft and elegant. "Better food, easier work," I murmured to myself, though the words sounded like a fragile excuse even to my own ears. Marta allowed a small, knowing smile to grace her lips. "You look like a lady now, not a skeleton. That new position agrees with you." The comfort that should have swelled within me was tempered by a pang of guilt. My siblings remained in the village, Albina and Aleksy clinging to what little warmth our meager lives afforded. Though I could send coins and parcels, blankets and medicine, the world I now inhabited felt impossibly distant. Each day in these silk sheets and warm sunlight reminded me of the chasm I had crossed. Letters arrived regularly from Albina, carried by Jerzy, the cart driver who had become our lifeline. I read them aloud by candlelight, savoring the sound of their voices in my mind. Aleksy's cough had faded, replaced by the sound of him laughing and chattering, flesh filling out his once bony frame. Albina had secured blankets against the coming winter and purchased real meat for their dinners. Each word they wrote brought warmth to my chest, but Albina's piercing insight always made my heart skip. "What are you really doing there?" one letter read. "You look different, even in your words." I smiled faintly, setting quill to paper to respond. "I serve an important lord. I am treated with respect. The work is peculiar, but safe." Not a lie, strictly speaking, though much remained unsaid. Stefan, ever flamboyant and deliberate, had become my guide to this new, strange existence. Leaning against the doorway of my chamber, he would give counsel with a flourish of his hands. "Rule 1, he said one afternoon, his green eyes glinting with mirth, "never reveal what you know to the regular staff. They cannot know. Their ignorance is their protection." He guided me through the politics of the castle, explained the hierarchy among the vampire attendants, and taught me the delicate balance of influence and fear. Through him I met Irina, cold, ambitious, and bitter, who fed a lesser vampire. Irina's gaze lingered on me once, sharp and calculating. "Must be special," she said icily. "He never takes human feeders. You must be slumming." "Ignore her," Stefan advised, flicking his hand dismissively. "She serves Casimir, a man hardly worthy of notice. She is bitter and petty." I nodded, absorbing the lessons, learning where I could, questioning where it was safe, and keeping the oath firmly in mind. Celestina's instructions continued in private lessons, a mixture of etiquette, history, and careful observation. "Never show fear to strange vampires," she instructed, ice in her tone but kindness in her eyes. "They can smell it. Never run. It triggers the hunting instinct. If an ancient vampire addresses you, bow your head in respect. Never speak of this world to humans. Dante took his turn with me, demonstrating basic self-defense in the hidden training room, knife work, hold releases, escape maneuvers. You are under Lord's protection, he said, every movement precise. But knowledge of defense is never wasted. One must always be prepared even here. The feeding sessions with Vitomir themselves had become a strange, intimate ritual. I would walk the corridors of the upper castle levels, heart taut with anticipation, and feel the pull of our bond strengthening with every step. The corridors were dark, heavy with ancient paintings and the lingering scent of old books and wax. I was always aware of being watched, though never quite certain by whom. I would enter his chambers, nerves bundled but resolve firm. He was there, seated in dark luxury by the fire, still, absorbing the world as if it were beneath him. Yet every inch of his presence drew me in. The shadowed contours of his face were familiar now. The memory of the raid lingered like a mark upon my soul. He was as devastatingly handsome as ever, yet his gaze, cold and commanding, carried the weight of centuries. I had learned to ask questions now, each met with his brief, often clipped answers, yet always with the faintest glimmer of amusement at my persistence. "Do you ever stop talking?" he asked one evening, voice low, a measured danger in the timbre. "Do you ever say something interesting?" I returned, chin high despite the thrum of fear in my chest. He paused, eyes dark, measuring, a subtle smile curving at the corner of his lips. "Careful, little one," he said softly, and I felt the power in the quiet cadence of those words. "Don't call me that," I replied, straightening, refusing to shrink beneath his scrutiny. "You're
I had expected trembling, a compliant, weak human, the sort who would quake at my presence and speak only when spoken to. What I found was something else entirely, a spark, sharp, defiant. Her spine did not curve beneath the weight of my gaze. She met it head on. I could smell her fear, yes, an undercurrent of it, but mingled with that was steel, determination. She moved toward me with her head high, either brave or foolish. I suspected the former. The scent of her blood teased my senses. It was unlike anything I had experienced in centuries. Warm, alive, utterly intoxicating in its vitality. I had forgotten what human blood could do, what it could offer beyond mere sustenance. Her pulse thrummed beneath my lips as I guided her closer. When I finally took her, gently, carefully, the gasp that escaped her lips was sharp, instinctive, yet tinged with something more. Her body stiffened, hands clutching at my shoulders as I drew the first measure of her blood. The taste, sunlight and earth, warmth and life hit me, and I drew back too soon lest I be overcome by desire I had not felt in centuries. I was unsettled. She was no ordinary human, no pliant little toy. There was fire here, and for the first time in decades I found it waking something in me I thought long dead.
Alone later in my chamber, I reflected on the strange rhythm our lives had adopted. I fed. I left. I trained. I learned. Yet, in the quiet hours, I allowed myself to touch the soft fabric of my new life, to acknowledge the way my body had changed, and to feel the bond that pulsed between us. I wrote to Albina, tenderly, carefully, preserving the secret she could never know. I am safe. I am well. The work is strange, but I am treated kindly. I love you both more than all the stars. Through the window, the courtyard below glimmered. Marta and Iwa laughed together, a sound at once familiar and achingly distant. I belonged to two worlds now, the one I had left behind and the one I was learning to inhabit. Both were dear to me. Both demanded sacrifices. Both would be my responsibility, and I would bear them both. Chapter 10. Beneath the Ice. The cart rumbled along the winding path down the Rysy mountainside, and I gripped the reins tightly, my stomach fluttering as we descended toward the village I had left behind a month prior. One day, one precious, fleeting day. Jersey, ever patient, drove silently, whistling occasionally, as if the mountain air had not altered the world into something unrecognizable. As we crested the hill and the village came into view, I felt a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. The cottages looked smaller, more fragile, bathed in the golden light of late afternoon. Smoke spiraled from chimneys, and the familiar chatter of villagers filled the air. Yet now, as I approached on foot, cloaked and dressed in garments that bore the sheen of the castle's wealth, the world I had known seemed to shift. Pani Kowalska's voice, sharp and incredulous, reached me first. That is Aniela Kowalska, she said, eyes wide as she examined me from head to toe. Impossible. The castle must feed servants well. I smiled faintly, deflecting her amazement with the grace I had been taught. They are kind, Pani Kowalska. I am treated well, yes. Albina answered the door to our humble cottage, her eyes narrowing, piercing. You look like a lady now. What really happens there? She asked, voice low and urgent. Her hands gripped the doorframe. I lowered my gaze briefly, then met hers, heart swelling at the sharp intelligence in her features. I began, and then, catching myself, instead loaded them with gifts, warm blankets, small coins wrapped in linen, jars of honey and dried meats. For you and Aleksy, I said, trying to smile through the guilt that tugged at my chest. Aleksy bounded forward, laughter spilling from him, no trace of the cough that had worried me so. He handed me a sheet of paper, eyes shining. I drew the castle, and you. I took the drawing with trembling hands, tiny me standing before the enormous black spires of Rysenberg, smiling bravely. The contrast made my chest ache, how small I truly felt in reality despite the confidence I now carried. Albina pulled me aside, voice softer but insistent. Tell me the truth. That place, is it safe? I placed my hand over hers. I am safe. I promise. Her gaze lingered, piercing. You're different. Not just healthy. Something else. Secrets in your eyes. I smiled faintly. I've just learned things. Grown. She frowned, unconvinced, yet she let it drop. As long as you're happy and safe. Pani Jasinska approached, her face drawn with worry. That castle, it changes people, she warned. Old stories. Be careful, child. Father Dominic came to me last, hand raised in blessing. Stay faithful, child. Pray. Keep your heart and soul safe. As the cart climbed the mountain again, taking me back to the castle, I felt the weight of two worlds, the one I could speak of, familiar and warm, and the one I could never fully reveal, gleaming with secrets and peril.
The purifier attacks had grown bolder, more organized, and increasingly funded. It troubled me more than I wished to admit. We were losing ground, intelligence was lacking, allies hesitant. The Blood Knights and I had spent hours in tense council, and yet the solutions remained maddeningly elusive. I wandered the castle restlessly, a habit I seldom indulged. Discipline was my constant companion, and yet the thought of strategy alone could not soothe the restlessness that lingered. In the library, she sat. Aniela. She was allowed here now, and Stefan had taken it upon himself to improve her reading. She was absorbed, lips moving faintly, murmuring the names of towns and nobles, deciphering the tangled history of Galicia. Her brow furrowed, eyes bright with focus and curiosity. I leaned against the doorway, silent. Few humans, especially those serving as feeders, ever drew my attention for more than their scent, their pulse, or their obedience. Yet this one, small and human, was different. Curious, intelligent, determined. An interesting choice of reading, I remarked, voice low, deliberate. She nearly jumped, hand flying to her chest, eyes wide. You startled me. You are in my library, I said simply, stepping forward. Her voice was careful, measured. You said feeders could use castle facilities. I seated myself across from her, firelight reflecting in the polished floor. She stiffened slightly at my presence. And what interests you about Galicia? I asked, curious. She paused, deliberating, then ventured boldly. What was it like when you were human? You may say it. Her audacity caught me off guard. I had not spoken of my mortality, nor of my past centuries, to anyone outside my circle. Yet something in her gaze compelled honesty. I was a minor lord of Nauitarg, I began slowly. 17th century. Duty-bound, yes, but a life of human simplicity. My sire, Lady Katarzyna, guided me. I served, as humans do, in small ways for small people. I have not spoken her name in decades outside the Blood Knights. Her eyes widened, not with judgment, but genuine interest. She asked questions, gentle yet probing. Do you miss it, being human? I stared into the fire, letting silence stretch before answering. Sometimes. I miss the simplicity of caring. Her gaze lifted, steady, unwavering. You still care. I've seen it. You protect your people. This valley. During the raid, you could have fled. You fought. Duty, not care, I replied, voice even. I do not believe that, she said softly. The words carried conviction. Her eyes held mine with a weight I had not expected, and something shifted between us, the air thickening with unspoken understanding. I rose abruptly, breaking the spell. You should rest. Feeding tomorrow. As she departed, I remained seated, silent. Centuries had passed without a true conversation. Most feeders were compliant, silent, invisible. She questioned, challenged, dared to see me for what I was, and it unsettled me more than I cared to admit.
Chapter 11. The Dance. The castle had been preparing for this night for weeks. I'd heard the whispers among the servants, seen the extra care taken with every detail, felt the tension radiating from even the oldest vampires in Lord Vitomir's inner circle. Alessandro Visconti and his mate Ingrid were coming, the legendary Carpathian lord and his equally formidable partner. Stefan had told me stories during our lessons, his voice dropping to something almost reverent when he spoke of them. Alessandro Visconti is not merely old, he'd said. He is ancient. He claims the Carpathian Mountains as his territory, and no one, not even the council, disputes that claim. He is as powerful as any vampire in existence, perhaps more so. And Ingrid? Stefan had paused, searching for words. Ingrid is his equal in every way that matters. Together they are perhaps the most formidable pair in our world. I'd asked why their visit warranted such preparation, and Stefan had smiled grimly. Because when a vampire of Alessandro's age and power visits, it's never purely social. He's assessing, always assessing, looking for weakness, for opportunity, for advantage. Lord Vitomir must present strength, stability, prosperity, or risk being seen as someone who can be influenced. The word influenced had sounded particularly ominous. Now, standing before the mirror in my chamber, I understood the weight of the evening ahead. My burgundy gown had been selected by Stefan himself, rich enough to honor the occasion, but not so ostentatious as to suggest I thought myself important. My dark hair had been arranged in an elaborate style I could never have managed alone, swept up to expose my neck in a way that made me feel vulnerable and displayed all at once. "You'll stay with me during the evening," Stefan had instructed earlier. "Observe everything. The Viscontis are educational. Watch how they move, how others react to them. You'll learn more about vampire politics in one night with them than in months of my lectures." So I had some context at least. I knew these were no ordinary guests. I knew this was a test of some kind, though I didn't fully understand what was being tested or what the consequences of failure might be. I took a deep breath, steadied myself, and left my chamber to meet Stefan in the corridor. The grand doors of the ballroom opened, and I felt my chest tighten at the sight before me. Candlelight glinted off marble floors so polished they reflected the flames like a mirror of fire. Gilded columns rose toward vaulted ceilings, painted with scenes of ancient hunts and celestial maps, the gold leaf catching light and throwing it back in warm, shimmering waves. Ornate tapestries depicting lords long dead hung between the columns, their threads still vibrant after centuries. Crimson and gold, deep blues and silvers, woven with such skill that the figures seemed almost alive in the flickering light. Servants and feeders hurried to take their places along the periphery, a carefully choreographed dance of subservience. Yet tonight I felt suspended between worlds. More than a servant, but infinitely less than the lords and ladies who glided through the space, as though they owned not just the room, but time itself. I stayed close to Stefan, who moved with the easy confidence of someone entirely at home in this world of ancient power and barely restrained violence. My fingers clutched the folds of my burgundy gown, the silk cool and unfamiliar against my work-roughened hands. The room was a riot of sound and sensation that threatened to overwhelm me. Musicians gathered near the far wall, tuning their instruments, the mournful cry of violins, the deep resonance of cellos, the bright punctuation of flutes. The sounds echoed against the high ceilings, creating layers of melody that hadn't yet formed into music. Long tables lined the walls, groaning beneath the weight of a feast that seemed designed to demonstrate the castle's wealth and power in the most visceral way possible. Whole roasted pheasants lay arranged on silver platters, their skin glazed to a deep golden brown, surrounded by sprigs of rosemary and thyme that perfumed the air. A massive honey-glazed ham occupied the center of one table, studded with cloves and dripping with sweet, sticky glaze. Pyramids of fruit rose like edible sculptures. Deep purple grapes, ruby-red pomegranates split open to reveal their jeweled seeds, golden pears and apples so perfectly red they looked painted. Delicate pastries were arranged in spirals and towers, cream-filled horns dusted with powdered sugar, fruit tarts glazed to a shine. chocolate confections decorated with gold leaf that caught the candlelight. And then there was the other food, the sustenance meant for different palates. Crystal decanters filled with blood wine lined a separate table, the liquid ranging from bright ruby to deep garnet to almost black. Some bottles were labeled in scripts so old I couldn't read them. Small crystal vials, each no larger than my thumb, contained blood of different varieties, some clear and bright, others thick and dark. The metallic scent mixed oddly with the roasted meats and sweet pastries, creating an atmosphere that was both luxurious and unsettling, a reminder that I stood in a world where beauty and death danced together without shame. The hall hummed with anticipation, voices rising and falling in multiple languages, laughter sharp and knowing. I felt the tension like a living thing, coiled beneath the surface of all this beauty, as if the walls themselves waited to see who would claim attention first, who would dominate, who would bend, and who would break. "Breathe," Stefan murmured beside me, amusement coloring his tone. "You look as though you're preparing for battle." "Isn't that what this is?" I whispered back, watching a cluster of vampires near the entrance, their movements too fluid, too perfect to be human. In a way, but the weapons here are words and glances, not blades, usually. Before I could respond, a shift rippled through the crowd, like wind moving through wheat. Conversations faltered and fell silent. Heads turned toward the entrance, and I felt my breath catch. Alessandro Visconti entered the ballroom, and the very air seemed to bend around him. He was impossibly tall, perhaps 6.5 feet, and he moved with a predator's grace that made every step appear effortless, despite the power coiled in his frame. His midnight blue velvet coat was embroidered with silver thread in patterns that suggested constellations, the work so intricate it must have taken months to complete. Beneath it, a silver waistcoat and crisp white shirt emphasized the broad line of his shoulders and the lean strength of his torso. His dark hair was swept back from a face that belonged on ancient coins, all strong angles and aristocratic lines, beautiful in the way a blade is beautiful. But it was his eyes that truly commanded attention, dark as winter nights, ancient beyond measure, sweeping across the room with an assessment that felt both dismissive and all-consuming. At his side glided Ingrid, and even across the crowded room she was impossible to ignore. Her hair fell straight and shining past her shoulders, so pale it seemed to hold light within it, creating an ethereal halo in the candlelight. Her face was striking rather than conventionally beautiful. High cheekbones, a strong jaw, a mouth that looked accustomed to both cruel smiles and genuine laughter. But her eyes were what held me, steel blue, clear as winter ice, and absolutely merciless in their intelligence. They moved across the room in constant assessment, cataloging every detail, every person, every potential threat or opportunity. Her gown was a masterwork of silver and black, the bodice fitted to emphasize the lean strength of her frame rather than softness. The skirt flowed like liquid metal, parting to reveal glimpses of long legs built for hunting, not dancing. Everything about her suggested violence held in perfect check, a warrior who had chosen to wear silk tonight, but could shed it as easily as a snake sheds skin. They moved together in perfect synchronization, not touching but orbiting each other like binary stars, their power so palpable the crowd seemed to part without conscious thought. Whispers dropped to silence as vampire after vampire acknowledged their presence with subtle nods, bows, or simply by stepping aside. Even Lord Vitomir, standing near the center of the room in deep conversation with several other lords, straightened and turned toward them. I watched as Vitomir moved to greet them, his own considerable presence just as strong as the couple. "Lord Alessandro, Ingrid," Vitomir's voice carried across the quieted room, warm but formal. "You honor my house with your presence." Alessandro's smile was subtle, carrying centuries of amusement at formalities he'd long since mastered. "Lord Vitomir, your hospitality is, as always, exceptional." His voice was deep, resonant, with an accent I couldn't quite place, something older than any modern language. "Your castle grows more impressive with each visit," Ingrid added, her voice surprisingly warm despite her predatory appearance. "The renovations to the eastern wing are quite remarkable." "You're too kind," Vitomir replied, and I caught the edge of genuine deference in his tone. I clutched Stefan's arm slightly, not from fear exactly, but from the sheer, overwhelming nature of their presence. The energy that radiated from them was almost intoxicating, power so old and refined it felt like standing near a storm that had learned patience. The musicians began in earnest, a waltz that filled the hall with sweeping, elegant sound. Couples began to rise, swirling onto the dance floor in a choreographed display of grace and power. Vampires danced with other vampires, their movements too perfect, too synchronized. A few brave humans danced at the edges, though their steps seemed clumsy by comparison. I stayed with Stefan, grateful for his steady presence, careful not to draw attention. Around us, feeders and lower-ranked vampires positioned themselves along the walls, watching, waiting to be needed. Yet Alessandro and Ingrid seemed untouched by the bustle around them. They stood together near the center of the room, not dancing, but simply present, surveying the gathering with the air of monarchs observing their court. Food continued to arrive in waves. Servants brought out roasted quail arranged in intricate patterns, their tiny bodies glazed and perfect. Trays of profiteroles drizzled with dark chocolate and filled with sweet cream. Plates of smoked salmon adorned with dill and capers, arranged like flower petals, spears wrapped in thin slices of prosciutto. Oysters on the half-shell, gleaming and cold, candied nuts, almonds, pecans, hazelnuts, glazed with honey and dusted with sea salt. Rich chocolate tarts with crusts so thin they looked like lace, the ganache filling mirror smooth. The scents layered and mingled, sweet and savory, butter and blood, smoke and sugar. For the vampires, servants replenished the blood wine and placed fresh vials at strategic locations, some vintage, some fresh, some mixed with wine or spirits to create variations I couldn't imagine. The colors ranged from bright scarlet to deep burgundy to brownish black, each shade presumably indicating something about origin or age or type. I took in every detail, marveling at the luxury, the excess, the sheer abundance of it all. Back in my village, we'd celebrated harvest with roasted chicken and fresh bread, maybe a pie if the season was good. Here, food was art, power made edible, a demonstration of resources that seemed unlimited. From our position along the wall, I could watch Alessandro and Ingrid without being observed. Alessandro raised a hand, and a hush fell across the nearest section of the room as he addressed a cluster of older lords. His voice remained calm, deep, carrying without effort. Every word seemed measured, deliberate, chosen for maximum effect. I couldn't hear what he said, but I saw the way the other vampires leaned in, nodding, occasionally daring a comment that Alessandro either acknowledged with a nod or dismissed with silence. Ingrid stood slightly behind and to his left, the classic position of a warrior guarding a leader's vulnerable side. But her posture suggested she was anything but subordinate. Her eyes moved constantly, tracking every subtle shift in the room. A vampire's hand moving toward his coat, a servant approaching from the wrong angle, a conversation in a far corner that had grown too intense. She exuded quiet authority, the unmistakable aura of someone who could end any threat before it fully materialized, yet who had chosen to remain still, to observe, to allow Alessandro to shine while she held the darkness at bay. Stefan whispered beside me again, his voice barely audible beneath the music. Notice how she watches everything. Ingrid notices what no one else does. She could dismantle half this gathering before anyone realized, yet she doesn't. That is mastery. He paused, then added in an even lower tone, "She's the one who killed Lord Valerius Thorn, you know? One of the oldest lords in the entire region, second only to the council members themselves. There was a challenge, I don't know the details, but he was ancient, powerful, had survived a dozen wars. She ended him in less than a minute. Some say it was so fast no one actually saw how she did it." A chill ran down my spine. I looked at Ingrid with new eyes, seeing not just the warrior, but the executioner, someone who had ended a being that had walked the earth for perhaps 1,500 years. And yet there was something else, something I noticed as I watched them together, a lightness in Ingrid's eyes when Alessandro smiled, a subtle curve of amusement that suggested not just centuries of companionship but genuine affection. She leaned slightly toward him as he spoke, not in submission but in intimacy, in the easy proximity of two people who had chosen each other across vast stretches of time. They were terrifying, yes, but they were also fascinating, magnetic in a way that made it impossible to look away. The evening wore on. I watched vampire politics unfold in glances and subtle gestures. Alliances formed and dissolved in the space between heartbeats. I saw a younger vampire, perhaps only a century or two old, approach Alessandro with a question, and watched the ancient vampire's face shift from polite attention to something colder, harder, before he answered in a way that sent the younger one backing away with a bow. I saw Ingrid's hand move once, just a slight shift, when a servant approached Alessandro from the wrong angle, and the servant froze mid-step, redirecting without seeming to understand why. I watched them move through the crowd, together, but not touching, communicating in that silent language of long-paired predators. Alessandro would glance at Ingrid, and she would respond, a slight nod, a shift of weight, a subtle tilt of her head. And I realized their power wasn't just individual strength, but this perfect synchronization, this unspoken understanding built over centuries of fighting and surviving together. I was so absorbed in watching them that I didn't notice Lord Vitomir approaching until Stefan stiffened slightly beside me. Aniela, Vitomir's voice was warm, almost gentle, though I heard the steel beneath it. You've been standing in the shadows all evening. Surely you didn't come dressed so beautifully, only to watch? My mouth went dry. Every eye in our immediate vicinity turned toward us, curious, assessing. I felt exposed, suddenly aware of every flaw in my appearance, every way I didn't belong here. My lord, I began, but he was already offering his hand. Dance with me, he said, and though it was phrased as a request, we both knew it wasn't. I glanced at Stefan, who gave me an encouraging nod, then placed my hand in Vitomir's. His fingers were cool, strong, enveloping mine completely. He led me onto the dance floor, and I felt my heart hammering against my ribs. The music swelled, a slower waltz now, intimate and haunting. Vitomir's hand settled on my waist, proper but possessive, and he guided me into the first steps. I stumbled slightly, my dancing lessons from childhood woefully inadequate for this, but he caught me effortlessly, adjusting his lead to accommodate my inexperience. Relax, he murmured, his breath cool against my temple. You're safe here. Safe is relative in a room full of vampires, my lord, I managed, trying to find the rhythm of the music. His laugh was genuine, surprising. True enough, but you're under my protection. No one here would dare touch you. We moved together across the floor, and gradually my body began to remember the patterns, to anticipate his lead. He was an excellent dancer, unsurprisingly. Centuries of practice had made every movement effortless, graceful. As my panic subsided, I became aware of how close we were, of the intimacy of the position, his hand on my waist burning through the silk of my gown despite its coolness. You've been watching the Viscontis all evening, he observed, neither accusatory nor curious, simply stating a fact. They're hard not to watch, my lord. There! I searched for words that wouldn't offend. Remarkable. They are, he agreed, spinning me smoothly around a slower couple. Alessandro has been trying to recruit me for some alliance or another for the past 50 years. Very persistent. And have you agreed? The question escaped before I could stop it. Too familiar, too bold. But Vitomir simply smiled. Not yet. His eyes met mine, darker than usual in the candlelight. You looked beautiful standing there, watching everything, like you were trying to memorize it all. Heat flooded my cheeks. It's all so different from anything I've known. Do you miss it, your old life? The question caught me off guard. I considered lying, saying what he might want to hear. But something about the moment, the music, the strange intimacy of the dance, made me honest. Sometimes, here, everything is, I struggled for the right word, sharper, more dangerous, more beautiful and terrible all at once. That's a very poetic way of describing vampires, he said, amusement threading through his tone. I was describing the castle, actually, I replied, then immediately worried I'd gone too far. But he laughed again, genuine and warm. Well played. He pulled me slightly closer, close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, close enough to feel the unnatural stillness of his chest where breath should have moved. You're adapting well, Aniela, better than most. You watch, you learn, you don't panic. Those are valuable traits. Is that why you asked me to dance, my lord, to complement my adaptability? I asked you to dance because you looked lovely standing in the shadows, and because I wanted to. His voice dropped lower. And because I enjoy the way your heart races when I'm near. It's intoxicating. The intimacy of his words sent a shiver through me, equal parts fear and something I didn't want to examine too closely. I forced myself to meet his eyes, to hold my ground even as we moved together across the floor. "Well, I'd hate to disappoint you by fainting from terror, my lord. That would be terribly dramatic." His eyes crinkled with genuine amusement. The waltz ended, and he held me for a moment longer than necessary before releasing me, bowing slightly, a courtesy I hadn't expected. "Thank you for the dance, Aniela. You may return to Stefan now." I curtsied, my legs shaking slightly. "Thank you, my lord." He smiled once more, then moved away, immediately drawn into conversation with several other lords. I made my way back to Stefan on unsteady legs, my heart still racing, my mind replaying every moment of that dance, every word, every look. "Well," Stefan said as I reached him, offering me a glass of wine I accepted gratefully. "That was unexpected." "That's one word for it," I muttered, taking a large sip.
Chapter 12. Alliances and Revelations. I awoke to the faint scrape of boots on polished stone, the scent of candle smoke lingering in the corridors. The night's ball still clung to my senses, the glow of candlelight on silk, the faint warmth of her hand during that waltz. I pushed the memory aside. Duty demanded clarity, not distraction. Alessandro had asked for a meeting in the early morning. I met him in the war room, maps spread across the table, Lucian and Dante flanking me. His presence carried centuries of grace and authority. Even among ancient predators, he radiated power. "Lord Vitomir," he said smoothly, voice like aged wine, "your scouts report increased purifier activity." "Yes," I replied. "They are bolder, more organized. We've developed devices to contain them, taser-like, non-lethal measures, but the threat persists." Alessandro nodded, eyes flicking to Lucian. "Our intelligence places a purifier training facility near your territory. Central Poland. Noble-funded, likely multiple houses, led by Grand Inquisitor Christoph Rainer." Lucian traced the route with long, precise fingers. "Rainer, brilliant strategist, fanatical. He believes vampires are demons, organizing humans across regions." Dante's jaw tightened. "We cannot ignore this. They'll strike here eventually." I agreed. "Strike first. Strategic advantage. Necessary, but not without risk. Celestina and Dante will remain to defend the castle. The strongest vampire guards will hold the walls."
The castle corridors felt colder than usual that evening, the shadows longer, the air heavy with the scent of wax and fire. Stefan had told me what he had heard. The lords were planning something, a journey, something dangerous. I did not understand the details, but I understood the weight behind it. And I understood with a clarity that frightened me, the cold dread that settled in my stomach at his words. I had tried to dismiss it at first, told myself it was merely concern for my own position. If Vitomir did not return, what would become of me? But even as I formed the thought, I knew it was a lie. The fear that gripped me had nothing to do with my fate. It was for him. When had it happened? When had he stopped being the monster I was meant to feed and become something else? I traced back through the weeks like counting prayer beads, searching for the moment I had lost myself. Was it during our conversations when he spoke of centuries I could barely fathom, his voice carrying the weight of lifetimes? Was it the way he sometimes looked at me, not as food, not as a servant, but as though I were something more? Or was it that night when he had pulled me into a dance, his hand cold against mine, and for those few moments I had forgotten what he was, forgotten what I was, forgotten everything except the strange intimacy of movement and music? Each feeding had become something I anticipated rather than dreaded. Each night I found myself wondering what we might speak of, what small glimpse into his ancient soul he might reveal. The sharp pain of his bite had become familiar, almost welcome, a strange communion that left me dizzy and warm despite the blood he took. I had begun to notice things, the way firelight caught in his dark eyes, the rare softness that sometimes touched his features when he drew back from my throat, the careful control in every gesture that suggested a man constantly holding himself back from taking too much. I had not meant to care, but caring I was learning, did not ask permission. My hands trembled as I walked through those endless corridors toward his chamber. The fear sat like a stone in my chest, heavy, cold, undeniable. What if he did not return? What if these dangerous plans Stefan had whispered about took him from this world and I never felt his presence again, never heard his voice, never offered myself to sustain him. The thought made me feel as though I were falling. When I arrived, he was waiting as always, seated in his chamber, reading by the fire. But tonight, something was different. There was a tension in the room, an edge that made my pulse race more than usual. "You're leaving?" I asked, my voice smaller than I intended. "This does not concern you," he replied, distant, cold. "But what if something happens to you?" The words slipped before I could think. The fear behind them was honest, unshielded. My concern was not for the castle or my position. I feared for him, for the absence he would leave in my life, for nights without his presence, his voice, the strange intimacy of his feeding. He froze. "I have survived 3 centuries of wars. I will survive this." "But what if you don't?" My voice cracked, almost betraying me. I could not help the way my chest tightened, the way my hands clenched at my sides. Could not hide the truth written plainly in my trembling words, that somewhere between duty and survival, between each bite and each conversation, I had begun to need him. The silence between us stretched, heavy with things neither of us had dared acknowledge. His eyes, cold and distant, softened slightly. My heart thudded painfully in my chest.
Her fear was not for herself, for the castle, for her wages. It was for me. The realization struck me like a blade between the ribs, sharp, unexpected, devastating. Mortals were fragile, yet she had chosen to care for something far beyond her comprehension. Me, a creature who had outlived empires, who had fed on countless souls, who should have been nothing to her but a necessary monster. My centuries-hardened heart stirred in a way I thought impossible. No, more than stirred. It shuddered. I had been fascinated by her since the night of raid. I had told myself it was merely curiosity, the novelty of someone who did not grovel or weep. But this raw, genuine concern shining in her eyes, this undid me completely. I tried to dismiss it, tried to summon the cold distance that had protected me for 300 years. She was mortal, temporary, a flame that would gutter out in the mere blink of my existence. I had watched empires crumble, seen generations turn to dust. I knew better than to let myself feel, but I was not able to. "Aniela," I began, voice low, rough with emotions I had no right to feel. "Just tell me you'll be careful, please." The plea in her voice shattered the last of my resolve. I stepped forward, closing the distance between us before I could think better of it. My hands cupped her face gently, thumb brushing lightly across her cheek. Her breath hitched, a delicate human sound, and I felt a strange warmth, a pulse of life I hadn't truly touched in centuries. Her skin was so warm, so impossibly, preciously warm. "I will return," I whispered, the weight of my vow deep in every syllable. Not a reassurance, a promise carved from the very core of my being. I swear it. "Promise?" Her voice was soft, trembling just slightly, trust and hope mingling in her wide eyes. "On my honor, on my name, I will return." The room seemed to vanish around us. I could smell her. Cinnamon, faint roses, something entirely her own. Her pulse raced beneath my fingers, a frantic drumbeat that called to both the predator and the man I had once been. Her warmth, her mortality, her impossible trust, it all struck me with a force I had long thought dead. I wanted to kiss her. The desire was so sudden, so fierce, it nearly broke through the iron control I had maintained for centuries. To taste her lips instead of her blood, to hold her not as sustenance but as something infinitely more precious. But I needed to feed. The journey ahead would be dangerous, and I could not afford weakness. Logic, practicality. I clung to these things like a drowning man to driftwood. "Come," I said softly, my hands sliding from her face to her shoulders, then lower, steadying her. "I need to feed before I leave." The shift in her expression was subtle, disappointment flickering across her features before she masked it with dutiful acceptance. But I saw it, felt it in the slight tension of her body beneath my hands. She tilted her head, exposing the pale column of her throat where my marks from previous feedings had faded to faint shadows. The gesture was practiced now, familiar, yet tonight it felt different. Weighted with all the things we had just confessed without words. I drew her closer, one hand supporting the small of her back, the other cradling the base of her skull with a tenderness that surprised even me. Her breath quickened against my collar. Her hands came to rest against my chest, not pushing away, but holding on. "Vitomir," she whispered, my name on her lips sending a shiver through my ancient bones. I hesitated, my mouth hovering near her throat, breathing in her scent, feeling the rapid flutter of her pulse. This act had always been transactional, necessary, a simple exchange. But now, with her concern still echoing in my ears, with the warmth of her trust radiating against me, it felt like something else entirely. Like intimacy, like devotion, like something I had no right to claim, but could no longer deny wanting. She nodded, her hand rising to touch the fresh marks on her throat. Our eyes met one final time, hers filled with worry and longing, mine with a promise I intended to keep at any cost. Then she turned and left, and the room felt instantly colder. I stood there for a moment, composing myself, wiping the traces of her blood from my lips with deliberate care. Her taste lingered on my tongue, a reminder of what I was leaving behind, what I had to protect, what I would return to. "Tell Alessandro I'm coming," I said to Lukian, my voice steady once more, the Lord's mask sliding back into place. But as I followed him through the corridors toward Alessandro's chambers, where I knew Ingrid would also be waiting, I could still feel the ghost of Aniela's pulse against my lips, still hear her whispered plea for my safety.
The dawn was a fragile thing, pale and hesitant, spilling light over the courtyard in silver streaks. I could not sleep. My bed in the feeder wing felt too quiet, too empty. The bond hummed faintly against my skin, a low pulse of anticipation, worry, and the unspoken tension of what I knew would happen today. I wrapped my hands around the edge of the castle steps and leaned forward, watching the courtyard come alive with quiet movement. Shadowed figures moved like predators in the early light. Vitomir, Lukian, Alessandro, Ingrid, and a contingent of the castle's most formidable warriors. Even in the morning haze, the weight of their presence pressed against me, ancient yielding. The regular servants slept on, unaware of the departure. Their ignorance was a blessing, a shield. Dante and Celestina gave final instructions, their voices clipped and precise, directing guards and warriors to their positions, ensuring the castle would remain unassailable in their absence. And then he appeared. Vitomir, clad in full armor, black and polished, a dark silhouette against the pale light. The first time I had seen him like this, fully armored, a warrior poised for battle, I felt my chest tighten. He was magnificent, terrifying, and utterly commanding, every inch of him exuding power and lethal grace. My pulse quickened. He scanned the courtyard, eyes sharp, calculating, and then found me. The others around me stepped back automatically, a subtle, instinctive respect. I froze in place, aware of every heartbeat, every shallow intake of breath. "You should be sleeping," he said, his voice cutting through the crisp morning air like a blade. "Couldn't," I whispered, barely audible. He walked toward me, each step deliberate, heavy with authority. When he reached out, his fingers brushed against my cheek, hesitant, aware of the eyes on us. Just a brief touch, but it burned into my skin, a promise, a tether, a warning all at once. "Stay safe," he said quietly. "Listen to Celestina and Dante." "You too," I managed, words fumbling. "Stay safe, I mean." His lips curved almost imperceptibly. "Always so worried," he murmured, soft now, almost tender, as though he were speaking to a child, yet the weight behind it held centuries of experience and battle. "Someone has to be," I said, forcing a small smile. The tremor in my chest betrayed me. He inclined his head, a rare, genuine smile flickering for the briefest moment. "When I return, we'll have that talk." I caught my breath, heart lurching. "When you return?" He didn't answer with words, only with a steady gaze that held mine longer than propriety or reason allowed. Then he mounted his black stallion, enormous and shadowy even in the morning light. The other vampires followed, their forms a dark procession through the courtyard. I remained on the steps, rooted, until they passed through the castle gates and vanished into the mountain mist. Even as the sound of hooves faded, the echo of his presence lingered, thrumming through the bond like a living thing. Celestina appeared beside me, silent as a shadow. "He'll return. He survived worse," she said quietly, voice steady, unyielding. "How do you know?" I asked, glancing at her. "Because now he has reason to," she said simply, a faint smile on her lips. I turned to her, frowning. "What do you mean?" She smiled slightly, enigmatic, and said nothing more. I returned to my quarters slowly. The castle felt impossibly large, hollow without their presence. Every heartbeat of mine seemed to echo against the miles that separated us, every pulse tinged with worry, longing, and an ache I hadn't fully acknowledged. And then, in the dim light of the courtyard, as the mountain mist curled around the gates, I thought I saw him look back. Vitomir. Even through the distance, our eyes met across the gap, and I felt it. Warmth. Promise. My chest tightened, and for a heartbeat, I dared to believe that he felt it too. That in the midst of war, he thought of me, as I thought of him. Chapter 13. The Betrayal. The castle had grown hollow without him. 3 days passed, and the halls echoed differently. Too quiet, too still. Even the servants seemed smaller somehow, their laughter and chatter dulled. I moved through my routine, visiting Marta, John, and Iwa, keeping the charade of normalcy, but the weight in my chest refused to lift. "You've been sad," Marta said one morning as I polished silver. "Castle feels strange without the usual presence." I smiled faintly, forcing warmth into my voice. "I suppose the castle is quieter without visitors of certain stature." I didn't elaborate. Humans could feel absence without understanding why. I tried to write to Albina, to keep a tether to home, to remind myself why I endured this strange, terrifying life, and I requested extra time with Celestina in the hidden training rooms. I envied Ingrid, the way she moved, lethal and elegant, and I wanted to learn, wanted to understand strength, even if I could never match it. Dante patrolled constantly, restless, every shadow a threat, every creak a potential alarm. I found myself on edge too, imagining the worst, knowing the purifiers would not leave our valley alone for long. That third night, I sat in my feeder wing quarters, candlelight flickering across my desk as I wrote. Words to Albina, careful, measured, hiding the truths they could never know. My pen scratched across paper when, without warning, the world exploded. The room erupted in violence. A massive shock threw me from my chair. The candles spilled ink across the parchment, dark and spreading like a stain across my heart. Glass shattered, screaming pierced the air. My ears rang with the chaos outside. I grabbed my shawl and bolted into the corridor. Smoke filled the halls, curling around my limbs, choking me. Alarm bells clanged, deafening, a warning and a countdown. Stefan appeared, blood streaked across his face, eyes wild. "Purifiers! They're attacking! Burn it down! Kill every monster and their servants! God wills it!" They poured into the castle, fanatical and merciless. Captain Volker led them, voice hoarse and screaming orders. Silver weapons gleamed in the torchlight. Servants scattered in panic, shrieking, fleeing without understanding. Dante and Celestina fought in the courtyard, outnumbered, silver flashing, screams and curses tearing the night. Celestina's voice tore into my mind, urgent and commanding, "Get the regular servants out. Hidden passages, now!" I stumbled toward the balcony, eyes wide. Flames licked the sky, smoke choking, and I saw the courtyard erupt into chaos. We were losing. They needed help, reinforcements, anything, but there were none. I bolted downstairs, my heart hammering. Marta and Eva were crouched in the kitchen, faces pale. "What's happening? Who are these people?" Marta cried. "Bandits," I snapped, voice harsh, though it sounded thin even to me. "We have to go. Now!" Jan appeared from the shadows, smoke curling around him. "East Wing is burning." Together we gathered the others, Iwa, Mart, anyone we could find, and moved toward the hidden passages. Stefan directed us with precision, shouting, herding, a fierce protector even as he bled. "This way, hurry," he barked. Celestina's mental command rang sharp. "East Wing collapsing, get out!" And then I heard it, crying, faint, high-pitched, terrified. Old Basia, she slept in the East Wing. My blood froze. "No," Stefan shouted, seeing me hesitate. "Don't! It's collapsing. You'll die." I ran anyway. I could not leave her. The East Wing was hell made manifest. Smoke and heat twisted around me, thick and suffocating. Flames devoured tapestries and furniture, licking walls, climbing beams. The ceiling groaned. My lungs burned, my eyes watered. There, beneath a fallen timber, was Basia. Her frail body shivered. Trapped, eyes wide, tears streaking soot-blackened cheeks. "I've got you, Pani Basia. Hold on." I lifted, pulling, straining against her weight. The heat, the smoke. We moved toward the exit, every step a battle. The ceiling groaned ominously above. I shoved her through the doorway to Jan and Stefan waiting. "Get her out! Go! Come on!" Stefan yelled, his voice almost drowned in the roar of flames. A massive beam fell, and I ran with all the speed my body could muster, but it wasn't fast enough. The crushing weight slammed into me. Blinding pain, impossible pressure, lungs burning, bones breaking. Blood filled my mouth, dust choked my vision. I tried to move. I could not. Stone, timber, fire, smoke, they pinned me. Cold spread through my limbs, creeping into my chest, taking breath and thought alike. I felt the bond, desperate, jagged, trembling. I poured everything into it. Fear, love, apology, every fragment of hope. Vitomir, Albina, Aleksy. I sent them all across the bond, as far as I could, my heart breaking with every second. I'm sorry, Albina. Aleksy. I'm sorry, Vitomir. I love you. I'm sorry I never said it. Darkness rose, swallowing the light, the smoke, the pain. My last coherent thought was a prayer to everyone I loved, a plea that someone somewhere would know I tried. And then...
Chapter 14, The Turning. The mission had been a success. For 3 days we had hunted the purifiers across the countryside, striking fast and precise. Their main facility destroyed, their forces decimated, their Grand Inquisitor Christoph Rainer escaped, but his army fractured and scattered. I had expected exhaustion, relief, even triumph. Alessandro Visconti stood beside me as we surveyed the aftermath, the first celebration beginning to stir among our forces. "Good victory," he said, voice smooth, confident. "Your territory should be safe now." I nodded, but even as his words washed over me, a strange prickling unease ran through my veins. Then silence. A cold, impossible void where my bond should have whispered her presence. Something was wrong. My voice was low, tight, strangled with ice. He turned, concern already written across his centuries-weathered face. "What is it?" I did not answer. I spurred my horse into a full gallop, vampire speed carrying me faster than any human eye could follow. Alessandro and his men recognized the urgency and followed, a shadowy tide of fangs and armor behind me. As we crested the last hill, the first sight hit me like a physical blow. Smoke rose in thick, choking pillars. Flames devoured the east wing, licking skyward, shadows of collapsed stone and timber casting a hellish glow across the courtyard. Bodies, torn and broken, littered the ground. Chaos reigned. I dismounted mid-gallop, running through the debris, each step a furious prayer. Dante met me halfway, blood streaked across his face, ash covering him like a second skin. "My lord," his voice cracked. "What happened? Where is she? Where is Aniela?" His expression broke, centuries of disciplined stoicism shattering. East wing collapsed. We pulled survivors, but my lord, she went back for the old woman. She's dying. Maybe already. No sound left my mouth, only raw terror, a sensation I had buried long ago. It clawed through centuries of ice and discipline. I ran, faster than I thought possible, toward the makeshift infirmary. Stefan was there, covered in blood, coordinating the wounded, his face pale and grim. I tried to stop her. I ignored him, my eyes scanning, heart hammering in impossible rhythm. And then I saw her, lying broken on the table, small, fragile, blood everywhere. Breath ragged, uneven, fading. I stooped, lifting her, my arms trembling in ways I had not known in centuries. Celestina knelt beside her, tears streaking her face. "I'm sorry, I couldn't protect her. She went back. I should have protected her." "No," my voice was raw, guttural, nearly inhuman. "No, you don't leave me." "She's too far gone, my lord," Celestina said softly, too gently, the words cutting me deeper than any blade. "Even vampire blood cannot heal this much damage. Her spine." "I don't care." My hands gripped her trembling form tighter. "I will bring her back." Lucian's voice, calm yet weighty, intruded. "Vitomir, you swore. After Katarzyna, you swore never to create another progeny." "I don't care," I repeated, teeth clenched, jaw tight. "I will not lose her." Alessandro, quiet, measured, finally said, "Then don't. Save her." I carried her to my chambers, keeping everyone but Celestina at bay. My halls, usually echoing with command, now only held my own panicked heartbeat and her faint, fading one. I laid her on my bed, blood still dark on her skin, limbs broken, nearly lifeless. I could barely hear the faint, irregular pulse in her chest. My hands shook as I bit my wrist, pressing it to her lips. "Drink," I commanded softly, urgently. "Please, Aniela, drink." She could not. Her body was too weak, too broken, too far gone. I forced my blood into her mouth, tilting her head, massaging her throat, praying in the ancient tongue I had abandoned centuries ago, words meant for gods who had abandoned me long ago. "Do not leave me. I need you. I love you. Come back to me. Please, please." Her body convulsed violently, once, twice. I held her tighter, murmuring her name, begging her to survive. Then, stillness, silence. My heart seized. Had I failed? Was she gone? Celestina whispered, trembling. "My lord." I pressed my ear to her chest. Then I felt it. A heartbeat. Slow, deliberate, different. A rhythm entirely her own, yet no longer human. The turning had begun. Her scream tore through the chambers, though unconscious, her body writhing, burning, fighting against the violent birth of transformation. I held her through it all, unwilling to leave even to feed myself. Celestina brought me blood in small flasks, but I refused. My place was at her side. For 3 days I held her as fire tore through her veins, as death and rebirth collided in flesh and soul. My whispers, prayers, and pleas did what words could not. They reminded her, reminded me, that even in the deepest shadow of mortality, we fight to survive. Lukjan brought reports, voices of the living reaching through the chaos. Castle damaged but repairable, casualties among servants. Marta, Jan, Iwa, innocent humans asking for her. They did not know she was neither dead nor fully alive. Stefan waited silently outside, praying, knowing. She might not forgive you, Lukjan murmured, taking her mortality without consent. I know, I said, my voice hoarse, raw. But she'll be alive to hate me. I cannot bear her death. By the 3rd day, the fever broke, convulsions ended. She lay still, pale, perfect, alive, undead, transformed. I held her hand, pressing my own lips to her fingers, feeling the warmth, or what passed for warmth, in this new form, waiting for her eyes to open, waiting to see her face once more. And for the first time in centuries, I realized how fragile eternity could feel.
Chapter 15, Awakening. The first thing I was aware of was sound. It was everywhere, rushing, layered, impossibly sharp. The scurrying of mice inside the walls, the slow drip of water 2 floors below, the heartbeats of humans moving far away. I could hear them all at once. The next thing was scent, blood, stone, old wood, velvet, and a faint metallic tang that was everywhere. Then sight. Everything was so clear, so sharp it almost hurt. I could see every dust mote turning lazily in the air, the stitching of every thread in the tapestries. My body felt too awake, too alive, too wrong. My last memory had been pain, the crushing of the east wing, beams falling, the fire, old Begia crying, the taste of blood in my mouth and my own voice in my head, sending everything I felt to Vitomir. Love, fear, apology, goodbye. Then darkness. I sat up abruptly. It should have hurt. Everything should have hurt. Instead, there was nothing. No pain. My body felt like coiled steel, weightless and impossibly strong. Powerful, different, wrong but also right. Easy, a familiar voice murmured. Vitomir was at my side instantly, like he had been waiting for me to move. He looked wrecked. Pale even for him, his dark hair mussed, dark circles beneath his eyes. I had never seen a vampire look tired before. His armor was gone, but his hands were still stained faintly with blood. His eyes burned when they found mine. "Don't move too quickly," he said softly, as if his voice alone might shatter me. What happened?" My voice was strange in my own ears, richer, lower, carrying an edge like a new instrument. "You were dying," he said simply. "The castle was attacked. You went back for old Bazia. The ceiling collapsed." The memories came back in a rush. Smoke, heat, the beam falling. Pain so intense it swallowed me. Darkness, and my last thought, him. "I should be dead," I whispered. "You were." I froze. That strange rhythm in my chest wasn't a heartbeat, not the way it used to be. My hands were paler, smoother, perfect. I looked at him, horror and realization dawning. "You turned me. You made me. I'm sorry." He looked like a man being torn apart. "I couldn't let you die. I'm sorry." A flood of emotions crashed over me. Fear, confusion, grief for what was gone, the loss of my choice. And beneath it all, something far worse, a burning that ignited in the pit of my stomach and spread outward like fire. I gasped, doubling over. "What is this?" "It hurts." "Hunger," Vitomir said. "Blood hunger. The first one is the worst. I'm here, and I won't." "You can. You must. If you don't feed soon, you'll lose control. I'll help you." He bit his wrist without hesitation, dark blood welling. He held it out to me. "Feed from me. It's safe. I'm your sire. My blood will help you adjust. I don't know how. Instinct will guide you." My fangs slid down on their own, sharp, alien. I stared at them, then at his wrist. The hunger was agony. With trembling hands, I drew him closer and bit. His blood hit me like lightning. It wasn't just taste. It was power, warmth, connection. Life and memory and emotion all at once. My hunger eased, replaced by something deeper, something like falling and flying all at once. I could feel him through it, his relief, his fear, his love. When I pulled back, gasping, my lips were red. What have I become? He wiped the blood away with a gentle thumb. Vampire, immortal, my progeny. I didn't choose this. You chose for me." "I know," he said quietly, "but you were dying and I couldn't. I've existed 3 centuries alone. Then you came and made me feel again, made me want to live, not just exist. I couldn't let you go. I swung my legs over the bed, too fast. The room blurred and I nearly stumbled. He steadied me with a hand at my elbow. Slowly. Everything is heightened now. It takes time to adjust. I tested my strength. A heavy chair in the corner felt like a feather in my hand. A silver goblet crumpled in my grip like tin. I stared at the crushed metal, horror blooming. I'm dangerous now. You're powerful, he corrected gently. There's a difference. I'll teach you control. I crossed to the mirror. My reflection stared back, impossibly beautiful, otherworldly. My eyes held a faint red glow. My skin was flawless, too perfect, too still. Not me. I'm a vampire, I whispered. I can go rogue. He came behind me, his reflection faint but still there, and pulled me into his arms. No. You will never. You're still you. Still brave, still selfless. Still the woman who runs into fire for others. How can you know? Because I've been alone for so long. Then you made me feel again, made me want to be better, made me care when I thought I'd forgotten how. Blood tears welled and slid down my cheeks. Why? Because I love you, he said. I've loved you for months. I was too much a coward to say it before, too afraid of this feeling. My breath caught, a habit I didn't need anymore. I thought I'd never see you again. When the ceiling fell, my last thought was you. I tried to reach you through the bond. I love you. I think I've loved you for weeks, maybe since the first time I fed from you, maybe since the raid. I don't know when it started. His hand tightened around mine, eyes glimmering with unshed tears. Are you angry that I turned you? A long pause as I wrestled with everything, loss and relief, love and rage all tangled together. I don't know. Ask me in a century. Right now I'm grateful to be alive and angry I didn't choose and terrified and still in love with you, even though you're impossibly arrogant and made this choice for me. He laughed, a real laugh, warm and rich, like a man surfacing after drowning. I can live with that. I touched his face, traced his sharp features with a new steadiness. I can wait a century to decide if I forgive you. I have time now. Forever, he said softly. Forever, I echoed. He kissed me then, deep, unhesitating, all the tension and pain and longing breaking at last, blood on both our lips. It didn't matter. When we parted, I whispered, "What happens now?" Now, he said, I teach you, help you adjust. We face immortality together. My siblings, they don't know. They're safe. Celestina and Dante protected them. The servants think you're severely injured recovering. Stefan knows the truth. I have to see Albina and Aleksy. You will, soon, when you have better control. New vampires are dangerous. The hunger is overwhelming. A few weeks of training first. I nodded, overwhelmed. He showed me then how to move without breaking things, how to breathe past the hunger, how to listen without drowning in every heartbeat. And, for the first time, he let himself be vulnerable with me. I'd forgotten what it meant to fear loss, he murmured. Then you came and suddenly I had something to lose again. When I felt you dying, I've never been so afraid. I'm here now, I said softly. Forever, he whispered. Forever, I said. Chapter 16, The Return. 2 weeks had passed since the castle, the collapse, and my death. My new life, if it could even be called that, was still a whirlwind of strange clarity, heightened senses, and insatiable hunger. I had begun to master it, slowly, with Vitomir's guidance. My hunger was still overwhelming at times, but manageable, and I fed only from him. Intimate, necessary, bonding. He even drank from me now and then, an exchange, a partnership, a tether that bound us closer than I had ever imagined. Castle repairs were ongoing. Dante oversaw everything, moving like a shadow among the wounded and debris. The servants had been told I was critically injured, recovering under Vitomir's care. Secrecy was vital. Only a few, Marta and Stefan among them, knew the truth. Marta had requested a visit, but Celestina gently refused. She needs complete rest, soon. Stefan had come, one of the few who understood the reality. How are you adjusting? I shrugged, though my senses picked up every tiny shift in his expression. It's strange. Everything is so intense. You'll get used to it. You're doing remarkably well for a new vampire. Yet there was one thing I could not ignore. My siblings. Albina and Aleksy. I had to see them. The thought of them alone, unprotected, without knowing if I survived, gnawed at me. Vitomir accompanied me, draped in a simple traveling cloak, a shadow of the Lord of Rysenberg. Celestina's voice, gentle but firm, echoed in my mind. Are you sure? Blood hunger around humans. I have to see them, I whispered. I need to know they're safe. Vitomir's hand settled on my shoulder. I'll be with you. I won't let you lose control. The journey was a blur. Using vampire speed, the world stretched and collapsed around us in streaks of stone, trees, and moonlight. Thrilling, terrifying, my senses strained to keep focus, heartbeats and scents amplified with every step. At the cottage, I slowed. From the shadows, I could hear them. Heartbeats rapid, strong, familiar. The scent of home, of my family, mingled with fear. Vitomir's hand squeezed my shoulder. Breathe. Focus on me, not the hunger. I knocked softly. Albina's face appeared in the doorway. She froze, her eyes widening, hand gripping the doorframe. Aniela? It's me, I said. Her gaze swept over me, noticing everything. You're different. Really different. More than before. Aleksy appeared behind her, mouth agape. You're so pretty, like a fairy tale princess. Are you better? They said you were hurt bad. I stepped inside, letting them see me fully. The cottage felt smaller, intimate in a way I could sense with every heightened sense. Mice scuttling in the walls, the sharp tang of old wood, their rapid, strong heartbeats. I led them to the chairs, careful not to break anything. I need to tell you something. About what happened, I began, struggling to explain. Albina's eyes, sharp and piercing as ever, studied me. You're not human anymore. Her statement wasn't a question. Always observant, always seeing. How did you? I began, but she interrupted. You don't breathe right. You barely breathe at all. Your skin is too pale, too perfect. Your eyes are different, darker, with something red in them. And you move. Wrong. Too graceful, too careful, like you're afraid of breaking things. I swallowed. There was an attack. The castle. I was dying. He saved me. Aleksy tilted his head. Curiosity brightened his eyes. How? Was it magic? I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. He made me like him. Like the old stories. The night creatures, to save my life. A long silence. Aleksy processed, Albina's calculating eyes never leaving me. Then he asked with the simple honesty of a child, Are you still my sister? Yes, always, forever now, actually. He ran to me, wrapping his small arms around my waist. Heartbeat loud in my senses, blood scent intoxicating. Hunger flared, but I steadied myself, placing my hands gently on his shoulders. Always your sister. Tears prickled, blood tears. I wiped them quickly before Vitomir could see. Albina took longer, her eyes scanning, assessing. Does it hurt? She asked. No, not anymore. At first, yes, but now it's just different. Are you happy? I considered it honestly. I don't know yet. I didn't choose this, but I'm alive. I'm here. I can protect you better now, so maybe I will be. That's enough for now, Albina said. Vitomir stepped from the shadows where he had stayed, and Albina instinctively moved in front of Aleksy, protective. Who? She began. Him, I said. The Lord, Vitomir, the one who saved me. Albina's gaze hardened. You're him, the vampire lord, the one she serves. Vitomir inclined his head respectfully. I am, Vitomir Dubowski. Albina's eyes narrowed. Do you love her? Without hesitation, he met her gaze steadily. More than my immortal life. Did you ask her before you turned her? No, she was dying. I was selfish. I couldn't let her go. Will you protect her? With everything I am. And will you hurt her? Never intentionally. I would destroy myself first. Albina weighed his words, then slowly nodded. Good, because if you do, I don't care if you're ancient vampire lord. I'll find a way to make you regret it. Vitomir's lips quirked, first genuine smile I had seen. I believe you would. You're very much like your sister. I laughed, first real laugh since my turning. She means it too. She's terrifying when angry. Albina grinned. Looks like you got your fairy tale ending. Only weirder and with more blood. Aleksy's eyes sparkled. Are you married? Both Vitomir and I stuttered. No. Not yet. You should be. If you love each other, that's what people do. We exchanged a glance, something passing between us. Perhaps, Vitomir said. Someday, when she's decided if she forgives me. How long will that take? Albina asked. A century or so, I said lightly. I'm still deciding. Vitomir smiled. I can wait. I turned to them. Come live at the castle that, both of you, safe, cared for, together. I can't lose you. You're my family. Albina's eyes softened. What about school? Learning? Best tutors possible, better than the village priest. Aleksy's voice piped up, hopeful. Will there be other children? Some servants have families, and you'll have each other. Albina's expression flickered with concern. And will we be safe with vampires? Vitomir knelt, ancient respect in his posture. I swear on my honor, on my name, on everything I am, no harm will come to you under my protection. You are Aniela's family, which makes you my family now. You'll be as safe as if you were my own blood." Albina exchanged a glance with Aleksy. "You trust him? Really trust him?" "With my life," I said. "My immortal life, apparently, with everything." They nodded, finally accepting. Relief poured through me. My family would stay together, safe. I could protect them now. Albina added with a sly grin, "Besides, if he's why you look like that now, maybe I should find a mysterious lord too, when I'm older." I shook my head. "You're staying human." Albina shrugged. "We'll see. I might want to be powerful warrior like you someday." Vitomir's amused voice cut in. "I agree with your sister. One stubborn Kowalska woman is more than enough challenge for one vampire." Albina grinned. "You called her stubborn. Guess you do know her." Aleksy suddenly hugged both of us. "We're family now, real family." Vitomir stiffened, unused to being called family in centuries, but slowly, carefully, he returned the embrace. "Yes, family." I watched him, wonder, pain, healing in his expression. As we prepared to leave, Albina pulled me aside. "Are you really okay with all this?" I exhaled. "I don't know. I'm angry he chose for me. Grateful I'm alive. Terrified of what I am. In love with him all at once. That's complicated. Everything's complicated now. But you're still you. I can see it. You're still my sister who'd run into fire for others." "Literally did that," I muttered. We laughed, familiar, grounding,